Chapter 1499. As time went by, more and more powerful cultivators gathered in the area around the soul refining tower. The appearance of some legendary figures attracted the attention of the audience and caused an uproar. Originally, some of the old monsters could be considered as great figures whose names shook an entire region, and they would be respected wherever they went. However, in the current environment they were actually somewhat lacking. Only when sage-level cultivators appeared could they cause such a commotion. Above the soul refining tower, a cloud gathered and Lang Qianheng stood on it. His tall figure was covered with a layer of dazzling light. He had blood-red hair and green eyes, and his appearance was devilish and handsome. Although he didn't say a word, he already attracted the attention of many people. He was waiting. I wonder if Lin Sun has the guts to fight. If he doesn't come, he will be humiliated this time. Lang Qianheng thought in his heart. On the other side, Mu Zhaixing from the great Luo ancient realm, Zhu Yingxue from the ancient Yin realm, and several other men and women gathered together and watched. They stood towering in the sky and looked down from above. They could clearly see everything that was happening in the field. However, there was more or less a sense of arrogance between their brows. Since they started cultivating, they had been told that the ancient Desolation realm was an abandoned and desolate realm, a barren land where even the path of cultivation had been lost. Therefore, subconsciously they all had a sense of superiority. Only when Emperor Xiaohao, Ruo Wu Fairy, and some other top figures appeared, they were a little interested. Apart from them, the other cultivators were no different from chickens and dogs in their eyes. Even the sages didn't attract too much attention, because they all knew that these sages hadn't set foot on the top. It wouldn't take long for them to become sages and surpass the sages in the field. How pitiful! If it weren't for the territory barrier, the ancient Desolation realm would have been conquered by the cultivators of the 8 regions. Zhu Yingxue sighed. The others couldn't help but laugh and agree. In their eyes, it was a great tragedy that the ancient Desolation realm didn't have many peerless experts in such a vast world. Mu Zhaixing frowned and reminded, "Be careful of the loose tongue. Although we are messengers, this is the ancient Desolation region. If we anger some powerful figures that we shouldn't offend, the consequences are not something we can bear." Zhu Yingxue pursed her lips in disapproval. The others didn't care either. They represented the other 8 regions as messengers. If the ancient Desolation realm dared to attack them, the experts of the ancient Desolation realm would have to bear the wrath of the other 8 regions when the battle of the 9 regions began. Many old monsters who were hiding in the dark nearby heard the conversation between Zhu Yingxue and the others, and their faces darkened. Being mocked and belittled by a group of juniors, the ancient Desolation realm didn't feel good at all. Even a senior of the heaven-reaching sword sect couldn't help but have an impulse in his heart. He wished for nothing more than for Lin Sun to show up and give these visitors from outer space an unforgettable lesson, and teach them how to behave. Time passed in this chaotic atmosphere. Only when I arrived here did I realize how unbearable I am, Wei Linka sighed faintly. The gap was indeed too big. In the past, in the place where she lived, with her identity, she could get whatever she wanted. But now, she could only stay in the peripheral area, and couldn't get close to the soul refining tower. This was the gap of identity and cultivation. But Wei Linka had never experienced it so deeply before. Right at this moment, her gaze inadvertently caught sight of a familiar figure walking leisurely towards her from afar. He seemed to be very low-key, but he didn't mean to stop along the way. It seemed that he was going to keep moving forward. Some successors of the heaven-reaching sword sect, who were maintaining order, saw this and immediately came forward to drive him away. Someone next to them sneered, "Where does this guy come from? So many old monsters don't dare to go in rashly. How dare he swagger forward?" Wei Linka and Ran Xing both noticed Lin Sun and recognized him. "Hey, I'm here." Wei Linka was about to say hello and invite Lin Sun over. Suddenly, a purple-haired young man laughed out loud and greeted him. Lin Sun, you finally showed up. Lin Sun. These two words were like a clap of thunder, causing all the nearby practitioners to turn their heads and look over. And those successors of the heaven-reaching sword sect who were about to stop Lin Sun shivered and stiffened. It was this guy. Their eyes widened and their faces turned green and white. Then, in the distant area, the eyes of Prince Xiaohao, Fairy Ruowu, Mi Hengzhen, Yimoha Ji Xingyao, Qiliang Xiao, and other peerless figures, who were waiting, all lit up and walked towards Lin Sun. Immediately, the crowd in this area was separated, revealing a wide path that extended all the way to Lin Sun. The atmosphere in the surroundings was deathly silent. At this moment, Wei Linka's mouth was wide open. Her fair hand that had just waved froze in the air. Her beautiful eyes were wide open with an expression of disbelief. She had traveled a great distance just to witness fiend god Lin's glory and cheer for him. However, she never expected that the man who accompanied her the entire way was actually fiend god Lin. This seemed too inconceivable. It made Wei Linka feel as if she was in a dream. But she knew that it was all real. When Prince Xiaohao, Fairy Ruowu, Mi Hengzhen, Yimou, and other top figures appeared, they had attracted a lot of attention. But now they had all come together to welcome him. Who could be so honored to receive such treatment? Demon God Lin, of course. And it could only be Demon God Lin. Ran Xing, who was standing at the side, stared blankly. He had been burning with jealousy earlier, swearing that if Lin Sun appeared again, he would teach him a harsh lesson. But in the blink of an eye, this guy had become Demon God Lin. Thinking of this, Ran Xing shivered all over and his face turned pale. He suddenly remembered that he had mocked Lin Sun on the way to White Jade Jing. The crowd nearby stirred. Wei Linka and Ran Xing came to their senses. They looked up and saw Lin Sun walking towards them from afar. "Brother Lin, what are you going to do?" Mi Hengzhen asked with a smile. "I saw a friend, so I went to say hello." As Lin Sun spoke, he came in front of Wei Linka and said with a smile, "I told you that we would meet again." Wei Linka said excitedly, "So you are Demon God Lin." She could clearly feel the gazes of the strong people around her, as well as the big shots in the field. They were all looking at her with surprise and confusion. The feeling of being the center of attention made Wei Linka tremble with excitement. She had never experienced such attention since she was a child. The whole world gathered in White Jade Jing, and at this moment, the focus of attention fell on her. This made Wei Linka look at Lin Sun with a touch of splendor. "Why are you standing here?" Lin Sun asked. Wei Linka blurted out, "I'm not qualified." Lin Sun smiled and said, "It's fate that we meet. Follow behind me." He didn't forget that this valiant and beautiful woman in front of him was wholeheartedly cheering for him. How could he spoil her mood? As he spoke, he walked forward. As for Ran Xing, he had been ignored from beginning to end. This kind of character was no longer worthy of his attention. Seeing this, Ran Xing breathed a sigh of relief. Lin Sun didn't care about him, which made him feel lucky. But immediately, when he saw Wei Linka following Lin Sun and walking excitedly towards the area near the soul refining tower under the attention of tens of thousands of people, he suddenly felt an unspeakable frustration. Being humiliated wasn't scary. What was more frightening was that Lin Sun didn't even have the interest to humiliate him and treated him like air. When they arrived at the soul refining tower, Lin Sun stopped and said to Wei Linka with a smile, "You can stay here. It shouldn't hurt you." Wei Linka nodded and smiled brightly. Today was the proudest day of her life. Prince Xiaohao, Fairy Ruowu, and the others couldn't help but look at each other and smile. They didn't say anything. Lin Sun didn't bother to explain. He glanced around and saw many familiar faces, including Xiao Qinghe, laughing at the heavens, Ye Chen, Loka, and Shun Baixian. Only Zhao Jingxian and the old toad were missing. The old toad was in closed-door cultivation, and Zhao Jingxian must be accepting the inheritance of the sect, so it was understandable that she wasn't present. "You have to be careful. This Lang Qianheng is not simple, Ji Xingyao said to him. This man is only one step away from becoming a saint. He is extremely talented and has mastered extremely powerful supernatural powers. He is a peerless enemy that can't be ignored. Lin Sun smiled at her and said casually, "Don't worry. Since I'm here, I'm confident." Ji Xingyao nodded, but she still couldn't hide the worry between her eyebrows. Many experts in the ancient desolation realm had great confidence in Lin Sun, but Ji Xingyao had read about Lang Qianheng in detail, so the more she read, the more frightened she became. This was an extremely powerful and exceptional heavenly talent. He hid himself extremely deeply, and no one could see through just how powerful he was. The more he was like this, the more people feared him. But it was useless to talk about this now. The battle that attracted the attention of the world was about to begin. It was like an arrow on a bowstring that had to be shot. Ji Xingyao could only pray that Lin Sun wouldn't be careless. At the same time, Lin Sun looked up at the sky. There was an auspicious cloud there, and a dignified figure stood on it. His blood-red hair was extremely eye-catching. It must be Lang Qianheng. Lin Sun, are you not confident enough to come here so late? My master has been waiting for you for a long time. Not far away, Bizhen, who had been forced to kneel by Lin Sun, walked over with a cold look, with undisguised hatred in his eyes. Chapter 1500. Do you still want to have a taste of prostrating yourself? Lin Sun glanced at Bizhen with a faint smile, and took a step forward casually. Bizhen's expression suddenly changed. She retreated almost instinctively. She knew very well how terrible Lin Sun's power was. But nothing unexpected happened. Lin Sun had already taken back his gaze. With this step, his figure rose into the air. Sarcastic laughter came from nearby, which made Bizhen feel ashamed and indignant. Above the soul refining tower, Lang Qianheng, who had been waiting for a long time, turned around and looked at Lin Sun, who appeared in his sight. He said coldly, "Don't you think it's a bit dirty to bully a maid?" His voice was cold, and his killing intent soared into the sky. Lin Sun stood there and smiled. "I'm already very merciful not to kill her." As he spoke, he looked at Lang Qianheng. The latter was dressed in a golden robe and had a slender and dignified physique. He was full of perfection. His long blood-red hair fell to his waist like a waterfall, revealing a sharp and enchanting face. A pair of cold green eyes surged with terrible divine light. "Arrogant!" A sneer came from afar. Lin Sun looked up and saw a graceful and enchanting woman with snow-white skin and long dark purple hair. She crossed her arms in front of her towering breasts with a touch of sarcasm on her pretty face. "What are you looking at? If Lang Qianheng didn't come first, it would be me who suppressed you this time." Zhuang Xue scolded. Beside her, some of her companions laughed. They noticed Lin Sun as soon as he appeared, but they didn't sense any threatening aura that made their hearts palpitate. In addition, they all looked down upon the ancient desolation realm subconsciously and had a sense of superiority. Even though they knew that Lin Sun was not as simple as they thought, they still had a kind of spontaneous arrogance when facing Lin Sun. "If you don't like it, you can come at me together. I promise I won't refuse anyone." Lin Sun's response was simple. His words were full of disdain. He seemed to be a plain person, but his words were so arrogant and sharp, which attracted the attention of all the people present. "This guy has always been like this." Laughing at the heavens laugh, the other peerless figures around him also deeply agreed, and they thought of Lin Sun's various performances in the domain of extinction. He seemed to be low-key and calm on the outside, but in fact, he had a firm and unyielding character. How laughable! A frog at the bottom of a well dares to be so arrogant. Could it be that you've forgotten about the 2 battles between the 9 regions in the past? At that time, the experts of the realm of ancient desolation were nothing but weeds that could be harvested at will. Isn't this bloody lesson enough for you to see your place? Zhuang Xue's words silenced the entire place. Not a single sound could be heard. Countless years ago, the realm of ancient desolation had suffered a crushing defeat in the Battle of the Nine Realms twice. Countless ancestors had been mercilessly slaughtered on the battlefield. It was a bloody scar in the ancient desolation realm. It was an unforgettable humiliation. Yet now, an enemy from the outer realm had brazenly spoken these words and ridiculed them. This was simply like a slap to the face, and it was trampling on the dignity of all of them. The expressions of some of the old monsters turned extremely ugly, and their hearts burned with rage. On the other hand, some of the other experts were infuriated and cursed. Damn it! Insolence! The scene became chaotic for a while. Countless eyes were fixed on Zhuangxue with hatred, as if they wanted to eat her alive. But Zhuangxue ignored them and sneered. What I said is the truth. Is there anything wrong with it? Unless you don't even dare to admit your failure. What was arrogance? That was it. This was the realm of ancient desolation, the white jade capital, which now attracted the attention of the whole world. But as a messenger of the outer realm, Zhuangxue showed off her power and acted unscrupulously here. It could be seen how much she despised the realm of ancient desolation. For a moment the crowd was furious, and their faces were livid. Who could forget the hatred and humiliation of the past? What Zhuangxue did was like pouring oil into the fire and rubbing salt into the wound. Especially some of the older generation, they were so angry that they almost couldn't restrain the urge to kill. Lin Sun's dark eyes were cold and surging with inexplicable emotions. He suddenly said, "Can we kill people in this battle?" His words shocked everyone present. Zhuangxue raised her eyebrows and was about to say something, but she was stopped by Mu Zhaixing next to her. "We are here as messengers to communicate with fellow practitioners in the realm of ancient desolation, not to fight for life and death. In the competition between the 9 regions, we don't kill messengers." Mu Zhaixing carried 3 swords on his back. He looked like a lazy person, but at this moment, he looked very serious. Lin Sun glanced at Mu Zhaixing and said, "I said before that I will give you a chance to challenge, and I promise to accompany you to the end. But before the challenge, you'd better watch your mouth." Mu Zhaixing frowned and then smiled. Zhuangxue was furious, but she was stopped by Mu Zhaixing, who said, "It's useless to say more. Let Lang Qianheng deal with it." At this moment, all eyes gathered on Lin Sun and Lang Qianheng in the sky above the soul refining tower. "I won't underestimate you." Lang Qianheng looked cold, standing on the auspicious clouds like a big flag in the sky. This sentence was very abrupt, but it could also be seen that he should know some of Lin Sun's past achievements and things, so he didn't show any contempt. Lin Sun's eyes were calm, and his expression was like an ancient well. He could feel the surging power in Lang Qianheng's body, which was like a vast ocean, turbulent and terrible. He could also feel that Lang Qianheng's state of mind and will were as solid and condensed as a rock. This peerless figure from the blood demon ancient realm was indeed an extremely powerful figure. No matter in which aspect, he was not inferior to Yi Mouf, Mi Hengzhen, and Wang Xuanyu. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was only one step away from entering the realm of Saint. "Since I came to the realm of ancient desolation, no one has been able to withstand more than 10 moves from me. I hope you can." Lang Qianheng's eyes flickered with killing intent, and an unparalleled fighting intent rose to the sky like a beacon of smoke. Many exclamations were heard in the field. Even some peerless figures narrowed their eyes. Only when they saw it with their own eyes could they know how terrifying Lang Qianheng's attainments on the peerless path were. "Unfortunately, in my eyes, you're far from enough. If you come at me together, you might have a chance to compete with me. But now," speaking of this, Lin Sun sighed as if he was a little dispirited, and then stretched out 3 fingers. "If I can't suppress you within 3 moves, I admit defeat." At this moment the audience was stunned. Whether it was the old monster or the ordinary experts, they were all shocked. It was not that Lin Sun's performance was not strong enough, but that he was too strong. But it had to be said that Lin Sun's strong posture made everyone present feel as if they had been injected with chicken blood, and they all became excited at once. As for Lang Qianheng, Zhu Yingxue, and the other guests from the outer area, they were stunned at first, as if they couldn't believe their ears. After that, their expressions became much colder. They had seen arrogant people, but they had never seen such an arrogant person. He wanted to defeat Lang Qianheng in 3 moves. Did he think he was a saint? Then, their expressions returned to calmness, and they took Lin Sun's words as a joke. Lang Qianheng, listen carefully. He said he would defeat you in 3 moves. Zhu Yingxue deliberately provoked Lang Qianheng. Lin Sun, you are too arrogant. Lang Qianheng's eyes were bursting with divine light, and he was furious in his heart. Since the beginning of his cultivation, he had never been looked down upon like this. This was simply like challenging his dignity. The first move. Lin Sun didn't want to waste any more time. He stretched out his right hand and pressed gently in the void. Buzz! The void within a radius of thousands of meters suddenly rolled violently and turned into a dazzling seal, with a swanee sitting on it. Around the seal, there were images of a big abyss rotating, the annihilation of the galaxy, and the roar of a real dragon. Boom! At this moment, the sky and earth seemed to be falling apart, and the place was filled with endless light. All the people present were shocked. Prince Xiaohao, Fairy Ruowu, and the others were all surprised. They hadn't seen Lin Sun for 2 years, and the power he showed was once again beyond their expectations, giving them a surprise. Mu Zhaixing and the others narrowed their eyes. As soon as Lin Sun made a move, they immediately restrained some of the contempt in their hearts, and felt that something was unusual, which made them awestruck. Even some old monsters distributed in the dark couldn't help but gasp. This kind of peerless power shocked them, which they had never seen before. As for ordinary strongmen, they only felt a sense of suffocation and despair. This level of power was too horrible for them to perceive at all. These were the feelings of outsiders. For Lang Qianheng, the feeling was completely different. When Lin Sun condensed this blow, he suddenly felt that all directions were like a cage, and there was no way to escape and no way to avoid it. In other words, he could only face it head-on. Open! Lang Qianheng shouted. His blood-red hair flew in the air, and the rolling devil chi on his body made him look like an ancient devil king. He gathered all the strength in his body and punched out. The void suddenly collapsed, and a black sun-like fist light rose into the air. Boom! The swanee seal and the black fist light collided. An amazing scene appeared. The black fist light, like glass, was easily crushed in the deafening sound of the collision. The sound shook thousands of miles, and the power disturbed the 9th heaven, and the swanee seal, which emitted a horrible aura, continued to press down. Lang Qianheng's face changed slightly, and he realized that something was wrong. He knew that since Lin Sun wanted to win in 3 moves, he must have used all his strength. At this time, it would undoubtedly be very unwise for him to hold back. Open! He roared and ran his strength to the extreme. His dignified body was completely covered with devil chi, and his momentum was boundless. Then he punched out again. This punch was branded with his Tao and Dharma. It was as if the great way of devil domain had come and gathered in this punch. The vision was amazing. Boom! The sound of the collision was earth-shattering, and all directions were trembling. Countless torrents of Tao light flew like a rainstorm, which made the place turbulent and chaotic, and the scene was shocking. However, what made everyone swallow their saliva was that Lang Qianheng's punch was still crushed inch by inch, exploded in the void, and turned into a rain of light. The swanee seal was like an immortal mountain. The Tao light roared, flowing with magnificent brilliance, and continued to attack. Chapter 1501. Poof! Lang Qianheng felt pain in his body and coughed up blood. His expression changed completely. He didn't expect Lin Sun's first attack to be so terrifying. The huge Swanee seal seemed to be sturdy and immortal. The nomological power it contained was also shocking and unimaginably powerful. Rumble! In the end, when the Swanee seal exploded, Lang Qianheng staggered and almost fell from the sky. He looked extremely pathetic. Dust and light filled the air. Outside the battlefield, there was silence. Many people gasped in shock. The power Lin Sun displayed in the first move was overwhelming. No matter how hard Lang Qianheng tried to resist, he was injured in the end. One should know that among the top figures in the longevity 9th Retribution realm, Lang Qianheng had an extremely dazzling and terrifying foundation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have attracted the attention of the whole world because of this battle. But such a peerless figure was defeated in the first move. At this moment, even those old monsters widened their eyes in shock. In their understanding, Lang Qianheng was a figure that could be valued and even feared by any top figure. But now, the power Lin Sun displayed had directly suppressed Lang Qianheng. Imperial Prince Xiaohao, Fairy Ruowu, and the others felt this the most. All of them had stepped foot onto the extreme path towards the Tao, so they were the most clearly aware of how inconceivable it was for Lin Sun to be able to gain an absolute advantage in a single move. Wei Linka was already stunned. She had come to cheer for Lin Sun, but she didn't expect that there was no need to cheer at all. He's so powerful. She was in a trance. As for Mu Zhaixing, Zhu Yingxue, and the other guests from the outer realms, they were somewhat surprised. Previously, they subconsciously looked down on everyone in the ancient Desolation realm and had a sense of superiority. Even before the battle, they were extremely angry about Lin Sun's so-called 3 moves, thinking that it was a provocation to their dignity. But now they were all speechless. Even the stupidest person knew that Lin Sun was not an ordinary top figure. In the silence, Lin Sun's figure didn't move at all. He only looked at Lang Qianheng with a trace of disdain. So, you're worse than I thought. All of a sudden, Lang Qianheng's expression became extremely gloomy. Being thwarted in the first move already made him lose face. Now he was ridiculed by Lin Sun, which made him completely furious. However, Lin Sun ignored him. Rise. A word came out of Lin Sun's lips. After that, 3,000 strands of profound sword qi soared into the sky like dense rays of light, and they transformed into a dense, profound, fierce, and ghastly sword formation. As soon as it appeared, the heavens and the earth were torn apart like a piece of cloth, and it was like a cracked spider web. Everyone had a feeling of amazement and shock in their hearts. What kind of sword formation was this? Whether it was the experts of the ancient Desolation realm or the guests from other domains, they all held their breaths and almost forgot to breathe. Kill! The sword formation seemed as if it was connected to the gods, and it deduced miraculous phenomena as it attacked. It just happened to be like numerous peerless sword cultivators had formed a formation to attack in midair. Break! Lang Qianheng suddenly took a deep breath. Suddenly, 3,000 demonic gates appeared around his body, and each gate showed the brand of a demon. Some had 3 heads and 6 arms, with silver snakes hanging from their ears. Some were stepping on demonic flames, swallowing and spitting starlight. Some were carrying mountains and throwing the universe. Each demonic gate seemed to lead to a strange and terrible demonic domain, and the aura they emitted covered the world with a layer of terror. 800 demonic domains. This was Lang Qianheng's talent, an unparalleled unique skill that was talked about and respected by countless demonic sages in the blood demon ancient realm. Zhu Yingxue and the others changed their faces slightly. They didn't expect that Lang Qianheng would use his trump card at this time. It could be imagined how much pressure Lin Sun's attack had caused him. Boom! In a flash, the sword formation and the 800 demonic domains collided, producing a terrible roar that seemed to make the sky collapse. A big shot of the sky-reaching sword sect wiped his cold sweat. If the sky-reaching sword sect hadn't set up a defensive formation near the soul-refining tower before the final battle, this destructive power alone could completely destroy this area. Rumble! The sword formation was fierce and overwhelming, causing the 800 demonic domains to shake and roar constantly. Seeing that his most proud magic could barely block the attack, Lang Qianheng's eyes couldn't help but shrink. How could this be possible? Lang Qianheng's heart was in turmoil. What was more terrible was that the sword formation had infinite mysteries, and each layer of sword qi was like a landslide, which made his 800 demonic domains on the verge of collapse. I don't believe it. Lang Qianheng let out a roar, and the might of the 800 demon domains suddenly rose. Indistinctly, one could see the figures of demon gods appearing, towering between heaven and earth, suppressing the universe and covering the sky. The power of each figure was enough to tear apart ordinary practitioners in the longevity tribulation realm, but under the attack of Lin Sun's sword qi, these figures soon couldn't hold on. Puff, puff, puff. The sword qi was so fierce that it seemed invincible. The phantoms of demons were torn apart and turned into demonic qi all over the sky. In the end, the 800 demonic domains were smashed to pieces. It was too strong. The Taishian sword qi was dazzling, resplendent, blazing, and flowing with peerless and sharp luster. It was invincible to kill the world. Lang Qianheng's eyes were red. He desperately resisted, but it was of no use. Instead, his body was swept by the sword qi, leaving bloody wounds. Finally, with an earth-shattering roar, the 800 demonic domains exploded. Then, Lang Qianheng coughed up blood and retreated. His body was bathed in blood and scarred, which made him look terrible. But all this was not over. Although the sword formation was worn down a lot, it still continued to attack. The sharp and frightening aura made the strong onlookers in the distance feel cold all over. No one expected that Lin Sun's second move would be more terrifying than the first. The sword formation seemed to be unstoppable, which was enough to make people desperate. Clang! Clang! In the face of a dilemma, two blood-red demonic blades, about 2 feet long and 3 fingers wide, appeared in Lang Qianheng's hands. Demonic double blades. Then, Lang Qianheng's skin was covered with a layer of dark scales that emitted a faint light, like a mysterious armor, covering his whole body. Demonic body! It could be said that at this moment, Lang Qianheng had exerted his most powerful strength without reservation. At that moment, looking from a distance, it was like an ancient demon descending to the world. Boom! In his hand, the demonic double blades swept out, and the bloody light swept out, crushing the sky and completely wiping out the sword formation. He blocked the second move. However, Lang Qianheng was not happy at all, because he was injured, and it was only the second move, but he was forced to use all his trump cards, which made him feel a kind of unspeakable shame. There was silence in the field. Everyone could see that Lang Qianheng was still frustrated in the second move. If the first time was due to his carelessness, then there was no such thing as luck the second time. As a result, Lin Sun's strength was more unfathomable. Just how powerful was he now? Prince Xiaohao and Fairy Ruowu all had an impulse to know. Those old monsters were absent-minded and in a trance. It was not flattery that Lin Sun was regarded as the top leader of the young generation in the ancient desolation realm. Even they felt shocked when they saw Lin Sun's power. As for Mu Zhaixing, Zhu Yingxue and others, their faces became serious. The contempt in their hearts was swept away, and they could no longer be proud. Lin Sun's achievements gave them a heavy impact, making them sober and realize the horror of their opponent. As I said, we can despise the ancient desolation realm, but we should also pay attention to those top figures like us. Mu Zhaixing sighed and then said, "Fortunately, the 2 moves have passed. With Lang Qianheng's strength, it should not be difficult for him to block the 3rd move." Zhu Yingxue and others looked gloomy. Although they were not convinced, they knew what Mu Zhaixing said was right. "Lin Sun, I'm afraid you will be disappointed." In the distance, Lang Qianheng gritted his teeth. His green pupils were bloodshot, and he looked particularly ferocious. "You only have 1 chance to attack. The promise of 3 moves. All the overmatches were shocked and woke up from the excitement. They couldn't help but worry. If the third move could not suppress Lang Qianheng, did it mean that Lin Sun would admit defeat? But Lin Sun said calmly, "The first two moves were just to test your ability. Do you think I used my real strength?" Lang Qianheng's face suddenly changed. "You haven't used your real strength?" The other people present were also stunned, as if they were struck by lightning. How terrible the previous two moves were. But it was not Lin Sun's real strength? The meaning of this was too frightening. "Lang Qianheng, don't be scared by this guy. He is not at the level of 8 skills of Green Abyss. It is impossible for him to do this." Zhu Yingxue sneered in the distance. 8 skills of Green Abyss. These mere 4 words represented the 8 supreme figures that stood at the peak of the other 8 regions beneath Qing Ming. Every single one of them possessed heaven-shocking prowess. Lang Qianheng naturally knew this, and he naturally wouldn't think that there would be such powerful figures in this abandoned ancient desolation. However, before he could think more, Lin Sun had attacked again. He flicked his finger gently. Buzz. A finger force condensed in the void, lying there like a history of the spring and autumn period, with a general trend that those who submit to me will prosper, and those who oppose me will perish. Instant of spring and autumn. However, the power imprinted in this finger was different from before. It gathered Lin Sun's own comprehension and understanding of Tao and law, and poured his own will and spirit into it. It was pointed out. The world was turned upside down, and the sun and moon lost their light. In Lang Qianheng's heart, there was an uncontrollable sense of horror, insignificance, despair, and helplessness. He was like an ant facing a great torrent that was about to sweep across the world. No matter how firm his state of mind and will was, at this instant, he still had a strong impulse to flee in panic. Chapter 1502. In the Blood Demon Ancient Realm, Lang Qianheng once fought with a true sage after he reached the fulfillment of the 9th retribution of Longevity Realm. At that time, he only had one feeling: despair. The gap was too big. It was like a small ant trying to shake a tree, or a firefly competing with the sun and the moon. Lang Qianheng never expected that in the ancient Desolation Realm, he would have such a feeling when facing an opponent in the same realm. The ghost body, the heavenly devil's double blades, all his reliance and foundation seemed so weak at this moment. The most terrible thing was that in the face of Lin Sun's finger, Lang Qianheng clearly felt that it was futile to escape. Boom. He didn't have time to think too much. The finger force that swept over like the spring and autumn annals was already pressing down. Lang Qianheng gritted his teeth and let out a beast-like roar. His blood-red hair flew in the air, and he rushed forward with all his strength. Even if he had to risk everything, he had to block the third move. This was about the outcome. Bang, bang, bang. However, Lang Qianheng still underestimated the horror of this blow. In just a moment, his attack and the defensive force around his body were crushed inch by the vast finger force like paper. Then, the black scales covering his body began to sink, crack, and explode. His flesh was badly mutilated, and his tendons and bones were torn. When looked at from afar, he was like an ant that was being crushed, and he seemed so tiny before the boundless finger that seemed to have been recorded down in history. The terrible oppressive force made Lang Qianheng's tendons and bones unable to bear the heavy load and were about to break. Blood flowed out of his 7 orifices like a spring. The whole audience was silent. Everyone's eyes were full of shock. Before, they didn't understand that Lin Sun didn't use his real strength in the first 2 moves. But now, when they witnessed the power of this finger, they believed it. This attack was completely different from before. The tyrannical power that could crush everything made some sage's hair stand on end. Mu Zhaixing, Zhu Yingxue and others couldn't help holding their breath, clenching their fists and looking unprecedentedly serious. Only then did they realize that they had underestimated Lin Sun from the beginning to the present. He was not a simple peerless figure, but a monster. Bang! Lang Qianheng's arm bones were broken by the pressure, and he let out a muffled groan. Bang! Then, his shoulders, chest, legs, and many other bones started to crack under the pressure of the finger force. Blood flowed out from different parts of his body like a fountain, and it dripped down into the sky while drawing out lines of blood that were horrifying, beautiful, and scarlet. He was obviously heavily injured, but he still persisted and roared, "I don't believe it! Open it!" But his roars were futile. The boundless finger force was like an immovable boulder that pressed down. Not good! Mu Zhaixing's expression suddenly changed. He realized that if this went on, Lang Qianheng would definitely die. "Fellow Taoist, please show mercy. You've won this battle." Lin Sun turned a deaf ear as if he didn't hear it. He just looked at Lang Qianheng coldly. As long as Lang Qianheng did not speak, Mu Zhaixing's words did not count. Puff! Lang Qianheng coughed up large mouthfuls of blood, and his face was pale as a sheet. Anyone could tell that he was unable to hold on any longer. "Master, please stop!" Bai Hen shouted anxiously. All eyes were focused on Lang Qianheng. They could see that Lang Qianheng was so unwilling and angry at the moment. But they also knew that under the absolute oppression of Lin Sun's finger force, no matter how unwilling and persistent he was, it was in vain. In the void, Lang Qianheng's back was bent by the pressure, and the muscles and bones in his knees were broken. He was like a cooked prawn, bent like a bow, and was about to be forced to kneel down. At this instant, he finally felt terrified, and he noticed the lethal aura of death. He didn't doubt in the slightest that the instant he was forced to kneel would be the moment he perished. Admit defeat. Mu Zhaixing's face was livid. Zhu Yingxue and other extraterrestrial visitors also looked gloomy. They were anxious, worried, and had an indescribable sense of humiliation. "Ah!" Lang Qianheng screamed, and his eyes were about to crack. But in the end, he opened his mouth hoarsely, and his voice seemed to be squeezed out of his chest. "I admit defeat." He spoke word by word and revealed boundless unwillingness. A trace of disappointment flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. Originally, he planned to completely destroy Lang Qianheng and break his hard bones. But now, he could only give up. Clatter! The vast finger force was taken back by Lin Sun and disappeared in the void. Having suddenly lost the oppressive force, Lang Qianheng staggered and fell to the ground with a thump. He seemed to be in an extremely sorry state. His defeated posture was seen by thousands of people, which made Lang Qianheng feel ashamed and angry. There was silence in the field. He won. Lin Sun really suppressed Lang Qianheng in 3 moves. Even many people could see that, if it weren't for Lang Qianheng's identity as an envoy, Lang Qianheng would definitely die in the 3rd move. Perhaps it was because Lin Sun's victory was so beautiful and shocking that the atmosphere in the field was in a kind of silence for a long time. "You can't even resist 3 moves from me. How dare you challenge all the top figures in the ancient Desolation territory?" Lin Sun said calmly. From the beginning of the battle to the present, he stood in the same place, motionless and unscathed, like the sun hanging in the sky for thousands of years. The indifferent voice exploded in the void, and the silent atmosphere was completely boiling at this moment. Countless excited voices exploded like a pot. "Great Devil Lin! No matter what kind of demons and monsters you are, you can't defeat Child Lin." In the past, Lang Qianheng had never been defeated in the ancient Desolation territory, which made many people in the ancient Desolation territory feel ashamed. But today, Lang Qianheng was defeated. He was defeated in 3 moves and had to take the initiative to admit defeat. Who wouldn't be happy about this? Not only those ordinary strongmen, but also those old monsters in the ancient Desolation territory were grinning from ear to ear, feeling happy in their hearts. Xiao Hao, Fairy Ruowu, and other people looked at each other with different expressions. They were all thinking about their chances of winning if they fought with Lin Sun. Wei Linka was so excited that she waved her snow-white arms and cheered. Above the void, Lin Sun no longer looked at Lang Qianheng, but turned his eyes to Mu Zhaixing, Zhu Yingxue, and others. I said before that I would give you a chance to challenge me. No matter how many people come, I will suppress them all. Now do you dare to fight? His words suppressed the noise in the field. Countless people opened their mouths wide. Lin Sun still wanted to fight. Moreover, he wanted to challenge all the outsiders. There was a moment of silence, and everyone was shocked speechless. For Mu Zhaixing, Zhu Yingxue, and others, Lin Sun's words were like a fire that ignited the anger in their hearts. Their faces became gloomy. Did this guy really think that he could ignore any of them after defeating Lang Qianheng? How arrogant! Let me do it. Zhu Yingxue's eyes were full of killing intent. She felt greatly insulted. Don't argue. Let me do it. A man with a body of 30 feet, bathed in surging water, said in a deep voice. They couldn't restrain themselves and were full of killing intent. Even though they knew that Lin Sun's strength was unfathomable, they just couldn't swallow it. Mu Zhaixing's expression changed. He suddenly raised his hand and stopped everyone from talking. Then he looked at Lin Sun and said, "Are you sure you want to challenge all of us?" Lin Sun's black eyes were cold, and he said indifferently, "Yes, if it's one-on-one, you can learn from Lang Qianheng's mistakes. So, you can come together and see if I can take it." The scene became more and more silent. Even those old monsters in the ancient Desolation realm were shocked by Lin Sun's courage at this moment. Many people couldn't help but sigh with emotion that the new generation was better than the old. Prince Xiaohao and Fairy Ruowu couldn't calm down either. When Lin Sun was in the Forbidden Land, he did something similar. Even in the world's recognition, Lin Sun was famous for his courage and fearlessness. But this time, the opponents he was going to face were different. They were peerless figures from other realms. Could he really resist them alone? Even Xiao Qinghe, Laughing Heavens, and others who had absolute confidence in Lin Sun were a little uncertain at this moment. Mu Zhaixing was so angry that he laughed and said, "Lin Sun, you said it." If he asked himself honestly, he would absolutely refuse any challenge in a one-on-one situation, because Lang Qianheng's crushing defeat was still vivid in his mind. But if they fought together, it would be different. At least, Mu Zhaixing believed that Lin Sun would absolutely die a terrible death. Zhu Yingxue and others all looked gloomy. They were all extremely proud and had a sense of superiority. Asking them to fight Lin Sun together was undoubtedly admitting that none of them was as good as Lin Sun, and they could only rely on the advantage of numbers. This made them extremely unhappy, but they all knew that it was the wisest way to do so. Don't you feel very surprised? Very surprised? But for me, this is normal. Otherwise, it will be too boring to defeat you one by one. Lin Sun said leisurely with peerless elegance. You'll regret it. With a clang, a silver sword swept out of the 3 swords on Mu Zhaixing's back. Its sharpness made the sky dim. Zhu Yingxue and the others also emanated a terrifying aura that soared into the sky. They were all angry. The scene became tense again, and the swords were drawn. Countless people's faces changed, and they watched closely. Even the sound of discussion stopped, because the situation Lin Sun was facing this time was too dangerous. Lang Qianheng was only one person. But now, there were 7 terrible figures who were not inferior to Lang Qianheng, and even stronger than him. For example, Mu Zhaixing was a peerless figure from the great Luo ancient domain, the world of swordsmen. With 3 swords, he was much stronger than Lang Qianheng. For example, Zhu Yingxue came from the bloodline of Candle Dragon in the absolute ancient domain. She was talented and had an amazing foundation. The same was true of other visitors from other regions. Under such circumstances, where did Lin Sun get the confidence to suppress all enemies alone? No one knew. Because Lin Sun had disappeared from the ancient Desolation domain for more than 2 years before. No one knew what he had experienced in these 2 years and what level his strength had reached. At this moment, all eyes were on him, and the war was about to break out. Chapter 1503. In the face of this scene, Lin Sun smiled and said, "That's interesting." Boom. His motionless figure suddenly stepped out at this moment. His long black hair fluttered in the wind, and his whole body was full of Taoist sounds. He had been invincible on the road of immortality for too long. Not to mention ordinary battles, even in a duel like the one with Lang Qianheng, Lin Sun didn't have the real fighting spirit. Now, he was finally interested. Boom. A thunderous sound came from the void. Lin Sun, who took the initiative to attack, seemed to have become another person. He was sharp and arrogant, with the momentum of looking up to the world. When he punched out, there was an indomitable charm that was enough to make the mountains and rivers lose their color. Do it! Mu Zhaixing's pupils shrank. Realizing the power, he took action without hesitation. Swish! The silver sword swept through the air, turned gently, and drew a round sword shadow of dozens of meters. A phantom of a demon sat cross-legged in the sword shadow. Starry rainbow sword. Even some old monsters were moved by that sword. Buzz! Zhuangxue raised her hand and took out a purple bronze mirror. A strange and cold eye appeared in the mirror, and a beam of black and white light shot out from the pupil. The black represented the night. The white represented the day. The black and white blended, just like the day and night, covering the world and dividing life and death. In addition, several other peerless figures also took action together, or took out their secret treasures, or used the supreme inheritance. For a time, the sky was full of colorful lights, the sound of Taoist sounds vibrated, and all kinds of strange phenomena appeared, which made the world tremble and fell into a great horror. Everyone could see that as soon as Mu Zhaixing and others took action, they used their real strength without reservation. Obviously, they knew that Lin Sun was extraordinary, so they didn't dare to hold back. Boom! In the sky full of attacks, Lin Sun didn't retreat, but moved forward. His figure was like lightning, illusion, and nothingness. He rushed up and waved his fist. It seemed crazy, but it was also extremely impassioned, with the attitude of fighting against thousands of enemies, which made people's blood boil. Clang! There was a sound like a big bell. Like an iron bar hitting a bronze bell, Lin Sun's fist collided with Mu Zhaixing's sword qi, and a dazzling light broke out between them. Many people couldn't even open their eyes. Their souls felt as if they were being cut by a knife. Crack! Amidst a deafening explosion, the perfectly round sword image was forcefully crushed. Mu Zhaixing's expression changed slightly. He dodged abruptly, and a trace of shock flashed in his eyes. Whoosh! A beam of black and white light shot out of Zhuangxue's purple copper mirror. It was as if the eternal night and the eternal day had spread out together. Wherever it passed, the void exploded like glass. Lin Sun didn't even look at it. Under his feet, an ice dragon rushed out with its head held high. With a wave of its tail, it broke the black and white light beam. At the same time, a golden ripple formed by Pu Lao's roar shattered a golden saber that came attacking from the side. Fu Lei's illusory figure flew out and smashed a Dao light that was flying toward him. A black lotus that burned with black phoenix divine flames enveloped a large halberd. In an instant, the attacks from all directions were resolved by Lin Sun's own Taoism. However, he did not frown, did not look back, and continued to kill towards the trees and pluck the stars. Although there were many targets, they should be defeated one by one. Use your full strength. The divine light in Mu Zhaixing's eyes was as sharp as a blade, which was extremely terrifying. There was no need to remind them. The others also knew that if they didn't use their full strength, not to mention defeating Lin Sun, it was very likely that they would be defeated by him one by one. This was absolutely unacceptable to them. Boom! Behind Mu Zhaixing, the remaining two swords also flew out together. One was cyan lightning, and the other was purple frost. Together with the silver sword, they formed a sword formation, flashing and tearing the sky. The others also took out their treasures and unique skills. Each of these peerless figures from the outer region had a shocking background. The treasures they controlled were all holy treasures, and the inheritances they learned were all first-class ancient inheritances. Even their cultivation was at the peak of the 9 retribution of longevity realm. They attacked together with their full strength, and they were like gods that were carrying out an unprecedented campaign in the sky. How terrifying! Many strong cultivators in the ancient desolation realm were shocked, and their faces turned pale. Most of them could not see the scene in the field clearly, but they could clearly feel the terrifying aura, which made them feel suffocated and collapsed. If it were me, how long would I be able to resist? Prince Xiaohao, Fairy Ruowu, Mi Hengjin, Yi Moufe, and the other peerless figures all looked solemn and focused. This battle made them tense up, and their emotions were incessant. The power of Mu Zhaixing and the others, and Lin Sun's bravery, all brought a strong and amazing visual impact to them. As peerless figures, there were too few people in the world who were worthy of their attention. On the other hand, the battle today could undoubtedly be said to be an unparalleled battle on the path to the ultimate abyss. Even if Lin Sun was defeated in the end, the courage he showed today was enough to make the strong cultivators in the world tremble. But at this moment Lin Sun was not defeated, and he did not show any signs of defeat. Even under the siege from all directions, he became braver and braver. He was like a peerless immortal, showing off his peerless brilliance under the sky. Good. Finally something is going on. His black hair flew in the wind, and his eyes were like lightning. He laughed out loud, and his fighting spirit was really boiling at this moment. He punched again. But whether it was the fist force or the profound meaning and power imprinted in it, it had become different from before. It was simple and magnificent, vast and empty, like an immortal practicing martial arts. Lin Sun moved with his fists, like a long-dormant dragon, roaring and dancing in the air. Mu Zhaixing's face changed again. He didn't expect that Lin Sun's combat power would improve again, which was unacceptable. Boom! Without hesitation, Mu Zhaixing used his trump card. Whoosh! 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 The sword formation formed by the 3 divine swords, violet lightning, green frost, and silver white, created a dazzling arc. It was like the Tai Chi diagram, carrying with it a smooth, translucent, endless, and rhythmic Zen rhythm. But its power was so strong that some sages couldn't calm down. This kind of sword formation was simply unseen. Boom! However, when the fists and swords collided, the 3 swords were suddenly shaken and flew backward, buzzing and wailing. Naturally, the sword formation was destroyed. Mu Zhaixing retreated again and again. He was shaken so much that his qi and blood were rolling, and a trace of blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. He was shocked again. How terrible was this person on earth? It should be noted that in the process, Lin Sun also fought with several other peerless figures at the same time, but he was still so powerful. How could Mu Zhaixing not be shocked? Not bad, come again. Lin Sun roared like a dragon roaring in the wild. His clothes were fluttering, and the light around him was boiling, as bright as the burning sun. He was running the mystery of the 9 strikes for shaking heaven, but in his hands, all the mysteries and the power of the Great Way had already been at his fingertips and interpreted into a new atmosphere. One punch shook the world, mixed with the invincible momentum of crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Mu Zhaixing held his breath and chose to retreat for the first time. This punch was so powerful that even he didn't want to take it head-on, so he could only avoid it. At the same time, he couldn't help but be angry. From the beginning of the duel, Lin Sun specifically targeted him. Did he think he could be bullied? However, he wanted to retreat, but Lin Sun followed him like a shadow, pressing him step by step, leaving him no room to retreat or avoid. Zhu Yingxue and others also noticed Mu Zhaixing's predicament, so they attacked from other directions with all their strength, but their attacks were all resolved by Lin Sun. His whole body seemed to be invulnerable. As soon as he thought of it, all kinds of methods poured out, resolving the layers of attacks. It was true that in this battle, he alone conquered the enemies in all directions, but the situation of the whole battlefield had been affected by him alone, instead of being suppressed. People who noticed this scene were all shocked. One person conquered and pushed forward, regarded the enemies as nothing, and his brilliance was so strong that no one could cover it. This scene made the sages in a trance. Again, Lin Sun was carefree. His only regret was that although these opponents could fight, they hadn't stimulated his extreme strength. For example, the cultivation of body refining. For example, the cultivation of soul refining. In short, at this moment, Lin Sun was only fighting with the cultivation of qi refining. Bang! In the terrible sound of collision, Mu Zhaixing, who was firmly stared at by Lin Sun, was finally shocked to fly out by a punch. His chest collapsed, and blood spurted from his mouth and nose. His face instantly turned as pale as a sheet of paper. There was a burst of exclamation in the field. Mu Zhaixing should be regarded as the leader of the enemies in the outer area, but since the beginning of the battle, he had been chased and suppressed by Lin Sun step by step. Until now, he was defeated and injured in just a moment. This was something that no one had thought of before. That's all. Lin Sun smiled faintly, and his black eyes were frightening. Mu Zhaixing took a deep breath and suddenly waved his sleeves. 3 swords swept up and hung upside down in a triangular shape, like an inverted sword mountain, pressing down. Of course, he was not convinced and still wanted to fight. Bang! But in a moment, Mu Zhaixing's attack was smashed. Lin Sun, like a dragon coming out of the abyss, was like a hot knife cutting through butter. Mu Zhaixing was defeated step by step. He was suppressed and coughed up blood again and again. His face became paler and paler, almost transparent. In the process, Zhu Yingxue and other strong practitioners tried their best to stop Lin Sun, but all their attacks were resolved by Lin Sun. This made a trace of shock in their eyes. They didn't expect that Lin Sun's combat power was so fierce. He alone was like an unshakable mountain. You can't. Suddenly, Lin Sun opened his mouth, and his voice shook the whole field. In the distance, Mu Zhaixing was already bathed in blood, and his face was beyond recognition. His hair was disheveled, and his body was shaking. Obviously, he couldn't hold on any longer. He looked gloomy. The whole field was silent, and everyone couldn't help trembling in their hearts. Lin Sun's domineering posture was like that of a god. At this time, Lin Sun on the battlefield seemed to want to continue. Without hesitation, he abandoned Mu Zhaixing, who couldn't fight anymore, and rushed to Zhu Yingxue. Lin Sun would not be polite to this vicious and arrogant woman. In just a moment, Lin Sun raised his hand and slapped Zhu Yingxue, making her scream. The crisp slap resounded through the sky. Chapter 1504. Zhu Yingxue's charming and beautiful face was swollen like a pig's head, and her hair was disheveled. She was so angry that she was about to go crazy. How could she not see that Lin Sun was deliberately humiliating her and trampling on her dignity? But she was powerless to resist. Even if she had many companions around her to attack together, it was useless. So fierce. The people in the field couldn't help but shout excitedly. Before, they were all very worried about Lin Sun, not sure whether Lin Sun would be a match for all the enemies. But now, as long as they were not fools, they knew that Lin Sun was invincible. Under his absolute strike, the number of opponents no longer mattered. The big shots in the ancient Desolation realm only had one thought in their minds. How could a cultivator of the immortal realm have such a terrifying combat power on the road of cultivation? No matter how experienced they were, they couldn't understand it. But they all knew that Lin Sun's road of cultivation was different from the secular world, and different from their understanding and cognition. Slap! A crisp slap rang out on the battlefield. Zhu Yingxue let out a shriek of agony as she was sent flying. Then, she fainted, not knowing whether it was because she couldn't bear such humiliation or because she was too seriously injured. This unexpected scene caused everyone present to be flabbergasted. A peerless figure from the Candle Dragon was knocked out by Lin Sun's slap. So far, Lang Qianheng and Mu Zhaixing were seriously injured, and Zhu Yingxue fainted. Only the other 5 guests from the outer region were struggling to hold on. But Lin Sun was even more imposing and elegant. Who would believe it before the battle? Prince Xiao Hao sighed with emotion. He couldn't calm down. As a prince, he was also the leader of the people on the road of cultivation in the ancient Desolation realm, and his momentum was no weaker than Lin Sun's. Although he had never really fought with Lin Sun, he couldn't help but admire Lin Sun's elegance in this battle. Fairy Ruo Wu and the others had the same idea, and they were all overwhelmed with emotions. At the same time, above the void, the other 5 strong cultivators from the outer region looked gloomy, and their eyebrows were full of surprise. Their fighting spirit was already shaken. Whoosh! Lin Sun did not stop there. After defeating Zhu Yingxue, his figure moved like lightning as he pushed forward. He stared at a handsome man who was 10 meters tall and had bulging muscles. His entire body was bathed in the surging light of water. His name was Kun Xiaojun, and he came from the northern underworld ancient region's Emperor clan, Kun clan. His combat strength was not inferior to Mu Zhaixing and Zhu Yingxue at all. Moreover, his innate divine ability was the Devouring Vortex Dao, which was similar to the Devouring Abyss Dao. The Kun race was a Kun in the sea and a Peng in the sky. They towered over 90,000 miles, and their innate talent surpassed many ancient races. Their foundation was extremely deep and ancient. As for Kun Xiaojun, he was one of the best amongst the younger generation. Lin, do you dare to compete with me in the power of the great Tao? Kun Xiaojun shouted explosively when he saw Lin Sun charging over, and his voice was like a thunderclap that surged through the sky. Boom! As he spoke, an enormous vortex of water suddenly charged out from his body, and it covered the heavens and the earth as it tore apart the nearby space. An enormous Kun could be faintly seen swimming within the vortex of water, and it swallowed and spat out a myriad of streams while giving rise to waves. A wave of exclamations resounded in the surroundings. Many people seemed to have seen an enormous Kun swimming in the sky, and it blotted out the sky and blotted out the sun, causing them to feel suffocated. Of course, this was only a phenomenon of the great Tao. But even then, it still caused the hearts of others to tremble. Why wouldn't I dare? Lin Sun's black pupils were like bolts of lightning, while a bottomless abyss suddenly appeared around his tall figure. It was enormous, boundless, and unfathomable, while stars were obliterated within it. For a time, the Vortex Tao and the Devouring Abyss Tao appeared at the same time. 2 types of great Tao that could be said to be unparalleled transformed into the laws of longevity that competed in the sky. Rumble! For a time, a storm raged while water rumbled, and even space seemed as if it was collapsing. It revealed a scene of chaos, destruction, and oblivion. Many experts felt suffocated while their expressions turned pale with astonishment. A battle of the great Tao was the simplest and most direct. It was a competition of 2 experts' attainments in the control of the great Tao. But at the same time, this method of battle was the most dangerous. The slightest carelessness could cause one's cultivation to suffer a heavy setback. Young people nowadays are really ferocious. An old man who had lived for countless years sighed in secret. Suddenly, Lin Sun's laughter sounded amidst the deafening turbulence. It looks like you can't do it either. Before his voice had died away. Bang! The vortex of water that seemed to devour the sky exploded. At the same time, Kun Xiaojun coughed up blood while his towering body staggered back, and he stabilized himself dozens of meters away. His face was ashen while there was unwillingness, astonishment, and bewilderment on his face. He seemed to be unable to believe that he would be defeated so quickly. It's your turn. Lin Sun paid no attention to Kun Xiaojun, and he looked at the other opponents. It was originally a group attack, but the current situation was that these foreign experts were being suppressed by Lin Sun one by one. All the experts in the ancient desolation region were stimulated to the point that their blood was boiling. If the battle hadn't really ended, they would have probably cheered a long time ago. "They're going to lose." A saint made a judgment, and many people agreed with him. With Lang Qianheng, Mu Zhaixing, Zhu Yingxue, and Kun Xiaojun being severely injured, the fighting spirit of the other foreign guests had been shaken. At this moment, it would be very difficult for them to protect themselves. Sure enough, what happened next proved this point. First, a peerless figure from the eastern Mulberry ancient region and the Shinto sect was pierced in the chest by Lin Sun's Taishian sword Qi. He was so shocked that he took the initiative to admit defeat. Then, a peerless figure from the Heavenly Fire ancient region was suppressed by Lin Sun with the profound meaning of infinite world of divination finger. His skin cracked and blood flowed like a waterfall. Then, the two experts from the Star Fiend ancient region and the Jili ancient region were also suppressed by Lin Sun one by one. From the beginning to the end, Lin Sun was invincible. It should be known that these foreign guests' attainments in the peerless cultivation path were all heavenly talents. But now they were suppressed one by one without any accident. "It seems that none of you can do it." Above the void, Lin Sun's figure stood, and the cyan Taoist light filled the air. Like an exiled immortal, he looked down at the audience. His indifferent voice rang out, but the entire place was silent. Everyone was shocked. They were in a trance and hadn't completely woken up, because no one had expected that Lin Sun could win such a big victory in such a one versus many battle. Moreover, it was an extremely beautiful victory. He wasn't injured and he wasn't suppressed. From the very beginning, he showed a crushing attitude. This was something that no one had expected. Looking at the 8 foreign guests, including Lang Qianheng, Mu Zhaixing and Zhu Yingxue, they were all miserable and looked gloomy. They no longer had the arrogant attitude before. Instead, they looked extremely embarrassed and pitiful. This battle was originally initiated by Lang Qianheng to fight with Lin Sun in the Soul Refining Tower of White Jade Capital. But now, not only Lang Qianheng was defeated, but other foreign guests were also suppressed by Lin Sun. How could they expect such a fiasco? Under the watchful eyes of the public, they stood here as losers. Their dignity and face were trampled, and they were ashamed to show their faces. Yes, they couldn't. Not even together. Even if they wanted to refute, they were powerless. He won. Someone screamed excitedly at this moment, breaking the silence in the field and triggering the excitement in everyone's hearts. For a time, the noise in the field was like a volcanic eruption, resounding through the sky. "Ha ha ha, Child Lin won. He suppressed all enemies alone. Aren't those foreign envoys very arrogant? But in the hands of Demon God Lin, they are just SOSO. This time, Child Lin will teach them how to behave. I have to admit that those foreign guys are indeed very powerful, but they deserve to be unlucky to meet such a ruthless person like Lin Sun." The boiling voices echoed between heaven and earth as if they were venting their emotions. After today's battle, no one in the entire ancient desolation realm can compare with Lin Sun's momentum. Xiao Hao and other top figures also had a kind of indescribable emotion at this moment. This man is really a demon-like character. Some old monsters sighed. This battle had shaken them to the core, but the final result was undoubtedly something they were happy to see. Lin Sun won. The morale of the ancient desolation realm was boosted, and the arrogance of the foreign visitors was also dealt a blow. In the future, who would dare to say that the ancient desolation realm was weak? He won, he won. He is so powerful. Wei Linka was so excited that she danced with joy, her eyes shining with pride. Next to her, Ran Xing looked numb. He knew that no matter how hard he cultivated in this life, he was destined to be unable to surpass Lin Sun. The gap was too big. Only the overmatches of the sky-reaching sword sect were the most hesitant. Lin Sun did win, but they didn't know whether they should be happy or not. After all, they were enemies. How could they cheer for the enemy's victory? But no matter what, if the news of today's battle spread out, it would definitely shock the White Jade capital and even the entire ancient Desolation realm. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, all the foreign visitors were suppressed by Lin Sun alone. Such a result was destined to shock the world. I'm afraid that, under the Saint realm, this man will be the leader. Some old experts sighed. Everyone around sighed. Isn't it better? The battle of the 9 regions is about to begin. With this man, our ancient Desolation realm will have the hope to avenge our humiliation in the battle of the 9 regions. Someone's voice was sonorous and impassioned. Just him alone? I think it's very unlikely. Don't forget that he only defeated some messengers today, and the 9-region battlefield is the gathering place of the most powerful forces in the other 8 regions. Some people shook their heads. They didn't look down on Lin Sun, but they didn't think that Lin Sun alone could change the situation of the ancient Desolation realm in the upcoming 9-region battlefield. It's better to have hope than to have no hope. For countless years, our ancient Desolation realm has been humiliated for too long. An old expert gnashed his teeth in grief and indignation. Chapter 1505. Lin Sun won. On the same day, the news spread at an amazing speed under the publicity of the Wind Whisperer clan. The whole world was shocked. A month ago, Lang Qianheng proudly announced that he would challenge Lin Sun in the sky above the Soul Refining Tower in the White Jade capital, which caused an uproar in the entire ancient Desolation realm. Over the past month, all eyes had been on the White Jade capital because of this arranged battle. They were all paying attention to it. Most people were not sure. Lang Qianheng was too strong. He came from an alien region with a great talent and a great foundation. People were worried that Lin Sun would lose in the duel. But now, as the news spread, the whole world was boiling. There were uproars and cheers everywhere. Even those ancient sects that stood at the peak of the world heaved sighs of relief in unison, and they felt delighted in their hearts. The ancient Desolation realm had been suppressed by the other 8 regions for too long. Countless years ago, the ancient Desolation realm suffered a crushing defeat in the 2 battles of the 9 regions. Then, it declined and lost its glory as an overlord in the past. In the past, the ancient Desolation realm had tasted blood, tears, and humiliation. It had been suppressed by the other 8 regions. Therefore, Lin Sun's duel attracted a lot of attention. If Lin Sun lost, it would be a heavy blow to the cultivation world in the ancient Desolation realm. But if Lin Sun won, it would be like restoring the reputation of the ancient Desolation realm. This was the general trend of the world. Fortunately, Lin Sun won in the end. It was a direct and extremely beautiful victory. No matter which cultivator it was, their hearts surged and their blood boiled when they found out about this news. It was no exaggeration to say that the impact of this duel was so great that it could be recorded in the history of the ancient Desolation realm and be remembered by future generations. Lin Sun became the most famous person in the ancient Desolation realm. His name, his achievements, and all the things he had done in the past had become a hot topic in the ancient Desolation realm. This was prestige. In the past, Lin Sun had killed his way to fame and offended many orthodoxies in the ancient Desolation realm. Some people admired and supported him, while others hated and disliked him. But now it was different. Even the orthodoxies that hated Lin Sun couldn't slander or attack him anymore. Otherwise, they would be against all living beings in the world. All in all, the impact of this duel on the ancient Desolation realm had just begun. Sacred Retreat Land, Divine Secret Pavilion. As a sacred land that was revered by countless experts in the ancient desolate region, the status of the Divine Secret Pavilion was extremely high. What the Divine Secret Pavilion was best at was deducing the general trend of the world and divining good or bad fortune. For example, the signs of the Great Era's arrival, the appearance of the Absolute Peak Domain, and the Battle of the Nine Regions. The Divine Secret Pavilion had made predictions in advance and announced them to the world. The disciples of the Divine Secret Pavilion were also known as the officials of the cultivation world, and they possessed the Spring and Autumn Brush and the Book of Annals, two supreme divine treasures. They recorded the annals of history and remembered the changes of the world. However, the atmosphere in the Divine Secret Pavilion today was exceptionally oppressive. In a grand and ancient hall. "I'll be leaving soon. Before I leave, shouldn't all of you give me a clear answer?" A dignified and indifferent voice rang out. The one who spoke was a purple-robed man. His eyes were deep and his aura was oppressive. He came from the Jili ancient region, and his name was Yen Qianqiu. He was a terrifying existence in the Boundary Emperor realm. However, due to the suppression of the laws of heaven and earth in the ancient Desolation region, the aura he displayed was only at the saint stage. Qi Qianqiu was the leader of the envoy group that had come to the ancient Desolation region this time. Lang Qianheng and the rest of the younger generation had followed him here. The hall was silent, and only Nie Qianqiu's slightly impatient voice reverberated through the hall. On the main seat, Miao Xian frowned and remained silent. On the other seats, the group of old people from the Divine Secret Pavilion were also silent. However, their slightly gloomy expressions showed that they were not calm. A while ago, Qi Qianqiu had brought Lang Qianheng and the rest of the younger generation to the ancient Desolation region. Their real purpose was to negotiate with the ancient Desolation region. The content of the negotiation was very simple. In the upcoming Battle of the Nine Regions, the ancient Desolation region had to hand over the 9 flying immortal tokens. The flying immortal token was related to the qualification to enter the Kunlun ruins. Every region had 9 of them. If they agreed to Qi Qianqiu's conditions, it would be equivalent to giving the powerhouses of the ancient Desolation region the qualification to enter the Kunlun ruins. In return, after the Battle of the Nine Regions began, the other 8 regions would choose to show mercy and not kill the powerhouses of the ancient Desolation region. How could the Divine Secret Pavilion possibly agree to such conditions that were filled with humiliation and inequality? Fellow cultivator, you're being too overbearing by doing this. Miao Xian sighed softly. Qi Qianqiu snorted coldly. Overbearing? If it wasn't for the 9 flying immortal tokens, do you think I would come to negotiate with you? This was the Divine Secret Pavilion, the ancient Desolation region. However, Qi Qianqiu seemed to be fearless, and his attitude was extremely unyielding. The reason was very simple. In his opinion, the ancient Desolation region had long since declined, and it did not have the qualifications to go against the other 8 regions. If we agree to your conditions, won't the powerhouses of the other 8 regions deal with the powerhouses of the ancient Desolation region in the Battle of the Nine Regions? Someone could not hold it in and spoke angrily. I've said that I'll show mercy and not kill them all. Qi Qianqiu was expressionless. All of you should know how many powerhouses your ancient Desolation region lost in the previous 2 battles of the Nine Regions. Do you want to repeat the same mistakes? His voice was cold and filled with disdain, as well as an undisguised threat. For a moment, everyone's expressions were uncertain. In the past, the ancient Desolation region had suffered 2 crushing defeats in the Battle of the Nine Regions. Countless heroes had died in the Nine Regions battlefield. It was a bloody humiliation and hatred. It was also the 2 battles of the Nine Regions that led to the decline of the ancient Desolation region, which caused the extinction of the path of cultivation. The losses were great. How could anyone here forget such a thing? The atmosphere in the hall became more and more oppressive. Many people felt sad and ashamed. They were the meat on the chopping block. This feeling was too humiliating and uncomfortable. The Divine Secret Pavilion cannot agree to this condition on behalf of the people of the ancient Desolation region. Miao Xian suddenly spoke. His tone was calm, but it was filled with determination. Chi Qianqiu was stunned, as if he could not believe it. Then, he laughed out of anger and said with a cold expression, "Is this what you call refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit?" Miao Xian said indifferently, "Whether you hand over the flying deity token or not, you can't avoid the slaughter in the 9 regions battlefield. If that's the case, why should we hand it over?" Chi Qianqiu's face was cold. It seems that the appearance of the zone of forsaken darkness has made the ancient desolation region have more youngsters on the path of cultivation. That's why you dare to make such a decision. However, do you really think that these youngsters can change the fate of the ancient desolation region? Ridiculous. He said to himself, "I can tell you that, if the ancient desolation region agrees to my conditions in the 9 regions battle, you may have a chance to survive. If you don't, what if we don't agree?" Miao Xian raised his eyes and looked at Chi Qianqiu. "If you don't agree, all the experts of the ancient desolation region will become prey in the 9 regions battlefield and will be killed one by one. And your front lines will also be trampled in this battle of the 9 regions." Chi Qianqiu said each word with a murderous look. For a moment, the people in the hall became restless and their expressions changed. The front line was the only line of defense against the other 8 regions. Once it was destroyed, the experts of the other 8 regions would be able to march into the ancient desolation region. By that time, the ancient desolation region would become a piece of fat meat that would be occupied and divided by the other 8 regions. By that time, no one knew how many Taoist sects would be destroyed, how many experts would be enslaved, and how many lives would be plunged into misery and suffering. Would all of this really happen? All eyes were on Miao Xian. The atmosphere was heavy. There's no need to discuss this. It's just a 9 regions battle. The people of the ancient desolation region would rather die standing than live on our knees. All of a sudden, a warm voice came from outside the hall. Miao Xian, who was dressed in a plain robe, walked in without anyone noticing. Seeing him, Miao Xian let out a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Senior brother, you're finally back." Miao Xian also smiled. "If I didn't come back, you wouldn't have been able to handle this hot potato. I made the decision, and I will bear the consequences. No matter whether this decision is right or wrong, when the people of the ancient desolation region ask about it one day, I will have a clear conscience." After a pause, he looked at Chi Qianqiu and said, "The juniors you brought here have all been defeated. I think you'd better take them away from here as soon as possible. Otherwise, I don't know how much more ridicule they will suffer." "What?" Chi Qianqiu was stunned, as if he couldn't believe it. Miao Xian waved his sleeve and a light screen appeared, showing the scenes of the battles that took place in the sky above the Soul Refining Tower in the White Jade capital. When he saw Lang Qianheng, Zhu Yingxue, Mu Zhaixing, and the others being easily defeated by Lin Sun, even Chi Qianqiu, a quasi-emperor, couldn't help but narrow his eyes and look gloomy. "Who is this person?" When the light screen disappeared, Chi Qianqiu asked in a low voice. "It doesn't matter who he is. What's important is that you really should leave," Miao Xian said indifferently. Chi Qianqiu couldn't help but sneer. "Do you really think that such a small thing can do anything in the 9 regions battlefield? Childish." After a pause, he continued, "I'm not afraid to tell you that in the 8 regions, the young people who followed me here can at most be considered first-rate figures. There are many people who are more powerful than them, such as the 8 Absolutes of Green Darkness and the 8 Regions Immortals Peerless ranking. There are too many." Speaking of this, he looked coldly at Mr. Shun. "This is the foundation of the 8 regions. Don't forget, the peerless cultivation path of the 8 regions has never been severed. Even those who have stepped into the Saint Realm have absolute power. Let me ask you, what does the ancient desolation have to fight against the 8 regions? Just that small thing? Ridiculous." At the end of his words, there was a thick disdain in his voice. His voice shook the hall and reverberated. Chapter 1506. The atmosphere in the hall was heavy and suffocating. What does the ancient desolation realm have to fight against the 8 regions? Such an overbearing question caused the expressions of every single senior of the divine secret pavilion to become extremely unsightly and aggrieved. Seeing this, Chi Qianqiu frowned disdainfully. Countless years had passed, but these fellows who had struggled to survive in the ancient desolation realm were still so cowardly. At this moment, Mr. Shin smiled and gestured for them to leave. He didn't speak, but his meaning was clear. Chi Qianqiu was stunned at first, then his face turned red and he said in a low voice, "Do you really want to die?" His voice was filled with anger and murderous intent. Mr. Shin stopped gesturing and said indifferently, "You are a guest and we respect you. If you don't leave, don't blame us for closing the door and beating the dog." Closing the door and beating the dog? Chi Qianqiu suddenly stood up, his eyes glowing. He was a great emperor candidate who had come to the ancient desolation realm as an emissary, but now he was being treated as a dog. This was no longer a slap in the face, but a humiliation. All of a sudden, his face became extremely gloomy and murderous intent surged. Mr. Shin ignored him and said indifferently, "If you want to fight, I'll fight with you. At worst, I'll break your dog legs and smash your dog head. Then, I'll personally send you back." "How dare you?" Chi Qianqiu was enraged. Bang! In the next moment, Mr. Shen did not move, but Chi Qianqiu's body seemed to have been lifted up by someone and smashed onto the ground, causing the entire hall to tremble. Everyone in the hall was shocked. Only Mr. Miao Xian sighed and shook his head. His senior brother was indeed a good-tempered gentleman. But when it came to enemies, his senior brother was the coldest, toughest, and most domineering one. Just like now. Chi Qianqiu felt dizzy and his body lay on the ground, his expression stiff. He didn't expect Mr. Shen to really dare to fight. Then, he saw Mr. Shen roll up his sleeves and walk forward, ordering, "Close the door and start beating the dog. He's just an emissary, but he's barked in our divine secret pavilion for so many days. If we don't break his dog legs, how will the divine secret pavilion have the face to stand in the ancient desolation realm?" Mr. Miao Xian and the others couldn't help but laugh, their eyes unfriendly. Previously, they had endured silently and sullenly for too long. Chi Qianqiu's expression changed drastically as he roared in anger, "Do you know the consequences of your actions? Can you bear it?" Bang! Mr. Shen stepped forward and punched him in the face. His movements were so rough that he looked like a hooligan fighting on the street. He didn't have the demeanor of a master at all. A single fist caused blood to spray out from Chi Qianqiu's mouth and nose, and his teeth fell out. He let out an enraged roar, and his eyes almost split apart. He was so hateful that he almost went mad. It was true that he was a quasi-emperor, but in the ancient desolation region, he was suppressed by the laws of heaven and earth, so he could only possess the cultivation of the saint realm. Under such circumstances, how could he have the strength to resist? Bang! Mr. Shen lifted his foot and stomped down. The bones in Chi Qianqiu's thigh were immediately broken, and fresh blood flowed out. Then, Mr. Shen sighed softly and said, "A guest should behave like a guest. If you make the host unhappy, he can't kill you, but can't he beat you up?" Chi Qianqiu was on the verge of going mad. He was angered to the point his lungs almost exploded, and he wanted to die from embarrassment and indignation. He was an emissary representing the 8 territories, and he was a sub-emperor who stood at the top of the sage realm. But now, he was being beaten like a dog. Crack! Before he could react, Mr. Shin slapped him hard on the back of his head, which made him see stars. He roared, "You're digging your own grave." Mr. Shin frowned and punched Chi Qianqiu on the ground. Soon, Chi Qianqiu's body was red and swollen, and his hair was disheveled. He was beyond recognition. In the end, Mr. Shin seemed to be satisfied. He let out a long sigh and murmured, "I haven't fought for a long time. I almost forget that I can fight too. If Lin Sun saw it, he would also be dumbfounded. Who could believe that Mr. Shun, a real senior in his heart, could be so rude to Lin Sun? Even Miao Xian and the others couldn't help but twitch their lips. They felt that Mr. Shun's action seemed to be a little disgraceful. On the ground, Qi Qianqiu was already dying. Both of his legs had been broken, and many of his bones had been smashed into pieces. He looked incomparably miserable. Senior brother, Miao Xian stepped forward and seemed to be worried. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Mr. Shun smiled gently and said, "You want to beat him too? Sure, as long as you don't kill him, you can do whatever you want." Hearing this, Qi Qianqiu, who was lying on the ground like a dead dog, suddenly trembled. He was really scared after being beaten. He was even a little worried that Mr. Shun would kill him at all costs. One had to know that a cornered dog would jump over a wall, and a cornered rabbit would bite. Once Mr. Shun disregarded all consequences and killed someone, he, Qi Qianqiu, would not be able to return alive. In the future, even if the 8 regions would avenge him, he would be a dead man by then. What's the use of revenge then? Before Miao Xian could speak again, Mr. Shun ordered, "Throw him out. He's just a quasi-emperor. He won't die from some superficial wounds." Immediately, an old man stepped forward and carried Nie Qianqiu out of the main hall like a pile of mud. "I know it's wrong to beat the messenger. But he made us unhappy. How can we let him be happy?" Mr. Shun glanced at Miao Xian and the others. "What's more, we, the ancient Desolation region, have no way out in the battle of the 9 regions. Since there is no way out, why should we tolerate it?" Everyone was silent. "We can't tolerate it anymore. We won't know the result until we fight." Mr. Shun's voice was calm but sonorous. In the end, he seemed to have thought of something and said with a smile, "Of course, Qi Qianqiu suffered such a great humiliation. Do you think he will tell others about it when he goes back?" Everyone was stunned at first, and then they couldn't help laughing. But everyone knew that what Mr. Shun did today had decided that the ancient Desolation region only had one choice in the upcoming battle of the 9 regions: fight to the death. The battle above the Soul Refining Tower in the White Jade capital had come to an end. In the evening, Lang Qianheng, Mu Zhaixing, Zhu Yingxue, and the other 7 peerless young figures were taken away by Qi Qianqiu with a gloomy face. From the beginning to the end, they didn't stay at all. "Senior, on the way out, Mu Zhaixing was so ashamed that he couldn't even say a word. Because they were defeated so badly in the battle with Lin Sun. The others lowered their heads as well. They were suffering from the humiliation." Qi Qianqiu glanced at the dispirited, frustrated, and angry young people. Thinking of the humiliation he suffered in the divine secret pavilion, his face became even gloomier. Not only did he not get what he wanted in this mission to the ancient Desolation region, but he was also humiliated one by one. Qi Qianqiu was so angry that he almost exploded. "Senior, how did it go with the divine secret pavilion? Did they agree to hand over the flying fairy token? With you here, I don't think they would dare to refuse, right?" Zhu Yingxue said. She wanted to change the topic and stop talking about the battle, but her words immediately provoked Qi Qianqiu. Like rubbing salt on his wound, Qi Qianqiu's face turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. "You were defeated, but you still talk so much nonsense. Don't you feel ashamed?" Qi Qianqiu scolded. Zhu Yingxue immediately became silent. Her face turned green and white. Mu Zhaixing and the others vaguely sensed that Qi Qianqiu's mission didn't get what he wanted. Otherwise, his face wouldn't be so gloomy. But with Zhu Yingxue as an example, they didn't dare to ask any more. "Let's go," Qi Qianqiu snorted coldly. He suppressed his urge to vent his anger and left with the others at full speed. On that day, the group left the ancient Desolation region. But the ancient Desolation region didn't calm down just like that. Lin Sun's peerless demeanor in the battle and his brilliant achievements were still spreading and stirring up a sensation. After the Absolute Summit region ended, Lin Sun disappeared. After staying silent for more than 2 years, he reappeared with such a brilliant achievement. Who wouldn't be shocked? Many ancient orthodoxies started to think that among the top figures of the young generation in the ancient Desolation region, Lin Sun was probably invincible. He had the power to lead the group. Some orthodoxies even put Lin Sun on the list of people they should never provoke. This guy was too terrifying. From the beginning until now, he was just a person without a sect, but his rise had never stopped. Until now, his power was enough to lead the ancient Desolation region. What was more frightening was that no one knew where Lin Sun's real limit was. Even in the battle with Mu Zhaixing and the others, he didn't seem to be able to force out his full strength. The most obvious feature was that after Lin Sun suppressed all his opponents in the battle, he was still calm and composed. He was unscathed and elegant. Only the forces that were once against Lin Sun had the most complicated feelings. They wanted Lin Sun to die, but they knew that in the current situation of the world, Lin Sun's prestige had risen to an unprecedented level. Whoever dared to go against him would be the enemy of the world. For example, the battle that happened in the White Jade Jing was the territory of the Heavenly Sword sect. In the eyes of the Heavenly Sword sect, Lin Sun was their mortal enemy. But in the end, the Heavenly Sword sect could only tolerate the battle and didn't dare to go against Lin Sun. After the battle, when Lin Sun left the White Jade Jing, the Heavenly Sword sect even secretly protected him. There was no other way. If something happened to Lin Sun in their territory, their Heavenly Sword sect would definitely be pinned with a pot of sh*t that they could not get rid of. At this time, Lin Sun, who had caused a sensation in the world, was sitting in a beautiful restaurant far away from the White Jade Jing. The restaurant was called the Drunken Immortal. It was 3,000 feet high and had an antique atmosphere. On the top floor of the restaurant, Lin Sun was gathering with a group of good friends. Emperor Xiaohao, Fairy Ruowu, Yuan Fatian, Mi Hengzhen, Yi Mo, Wang Xuanyu, Ji Xingyao, Qi Lingxiao, and other top figures of the world were all there. The atmosphere of the banquet was lively and harmonious. No one was worried about any danger, because there were many sages guarding outside the Drunken Immortal restaurant. It should be known that among those present, apart from Lin Sun and a few others, the other top figures all had ancient orthodoxies standing behind them. How could these orthodoxies let the top figures under them be in danger? Chapter 1507. Outside the Drunken Immortal Tower, a sage exclaimed, "In the future, the ancient Desolation realm will belong to those young people in the tower." Those young people had reached the peak of immortality and surpassed their peers. They were like suns hanging in the sky above the ancient Desolation realm. When they became sages, even the sage realm monsters in the ancient Desolation realm wouldn't be able to compete with them. If the Battle of the 9 Zones didn't happen, it would. But now, everyone knows that the Battle of the 9 Zones is about to begin. Those young people are destined to enter the 9 Zones battlefield. Another sage suddenly said, "Let me ask you. How many of them do you think will come back alive from the 9 Zones battlefield?" His words silenced all the sages. Their hearts were heavy. The Battle of the 9 Zones. Such a war had dealt a heavy blow to the realm of ancient Desolation in the past. Countless heavens chosen had died on the battlefield, filled with blood, tears, and humiliation. In the upcoming Battle of the 9 Regions, would the ancient Desolation realm repeat the tragedy of the past? Inside the Drunken Immortal Tower, a group of top figures gathered. While drinking, they also talked about the Battle of the 9 Zones. If the 9 Zones battlefield opens, the ancient Desolation realm will be led by a group of true sages. Mi Hengzhen said, "This isn't a small matter. It's a matter of life and death for the ancient Desolation realm. Therefore, all ancient orthodoxies will send their strongest forces." But as you all know, the Battle of the 9 Zones is divided into 2 battlefields. One is the frontline battlefield. It's the stronghold of the ancient Desolation realm against the other 8 zones. Only experts above the sage realm are qualified to enter. Others will die if they go. The other is the 9 Zones battlefield. It's located between the 9 territories and is made up of several continents. Because of the restrictions of the natural laws, the 9 Zones battlefield can only accommodate experts at the true sage realm. But normally, experts below the king realm can't survive in the 9 Zones battlefield. Therefore, the Battle of the 9 Zones battlefield is probably a place for experts above the king realm but below the sage realm. This time, we're going to the 9 Zones battlefield. Mi Hengzhen took a deep breath and continued, at that time, the experts from the other 8 regions will swarm in as well. I'm sure that once the war breaks out, the experts from the other 8 realms will definitely target our ancient desolation realm. Everyone's eyes narrowed when they heard this. Although the 8 regions are not an alliance, everyone knows that in the previous 2 battles between the 9 regions, they had reached an agreement. First, they would kill the ancient desolation, and then they would compete. What do you mean? Mi Hengzhen sneered. Then they'll attack together and wipe out the experts of the ancient desolation realm first. Then, the experts of the other 8 realms will compete with each other. The originally harmonious atmosphere in the main hall suddenly became silent. Every peerless figure had a gloomy expression on their faces. First kill the ancient desolation, then fight for supremacy. It was just a few words, but they were enough to enrage anyone in the realm of ancient desolation. This time, it is destined to be different from the past. Someone gritted his teeth and swore. At that time, I'd like to see what gives them the confidence to target us like this. Most of them were silent. Being targeted by the experts of the 8 realms, it was conceivable how dangerous the situation would be after they entered the 9 regions battlefield. The most terrifying thing was that in the other 8 realms, the path of Zhu Xiu's cultivation had never been cut off, which meant that any random expert was very likely to be a peerless figure. There was no doubt that there were many experts at the level of true Saint Zhu Xiu. Under such circumstances, if they wanted to survive in the 9 regions battlefield, it was very likely that they would face extremely severe challenges. How much hope did they have to counterattack and defeat the invasion of the 8 realms? For a moment, everyone had different thoughts, and the wine was tasteless. Xiao Hao suddenly chuckled and said, "This time, the 9 regions battle is destined to be different from the past. No matter how dangerous the situation is, after all, we still have hope." That's right. After entering the 9 regions battlefield, we should seek the way to become a saint as soon as possible. In this way, we won't be afraid of any opponent. Ruo Wu Fairy also said in a clear voice. They were all strong-willed people, so it was impossible for them to be affected by these things. What do you think, Brother Lin? Ruo Wu Fairy suddenly looked at Lin Sun, who had been silent all this while. Lin Sun was stunned and said, "I don't have any opinion. I'm just thinking about how many enemies I have to kill and how many battle merits and fortune I have to collect to activate the flying celestial token and have the qualifications to enter the Kunlun ruins." Everyone was stunned, and they could not help but laugh. Some people could not help but sigh in their hearts. As expected of demon god Lin. While they were worried about the dangers they would face in the 9 regions battle, he was actually thinking about entering the Kunlun ruins. Haha, looks like Brother Lin must have a flying celestial token in your hands. Xiao Hao laughed heartily. That's right. Lin Sun did not hide it. Brother Lin, you have to be careful. The enemies of the 8 realms are most concerned about the flying celestial token. If they find out about this, they'll definitely see you as a must-kill target. Yi Moha reminded. Lin Sun smiled casually. Isn't that better? It's equivalent to a huge wave of battle merits and fortune coming to me. I'll just accept them one by one. Everyone burst into laughter again, and the atmosphere in the hall became much more harmonious. In the past, there would definitely be people who would criticize Lin Sun for being too arrogant and exaggerating. However, now, everyone took it for granted that Lin Sun's words were normal. Otherwise, they would be letting down the monstrous prestige he possessed now. Of course, this was just a joke. When the 9 regions battle really started, they were sure that even Lin Sun would not dare to be careless. The banquet only ended late at night. Lin Sun chatted with Laughing at the Heavens, Ye Chen, Ji Xingyao, and the other old friends for a long time before leaving alone. In the past few months, he had been like a passerby traveling the world, seeing the beauty of the mountains and rivers, and the various forms of the mortal world. He had also spent a month in the Tao of Stone inscriptions taught by Mr. Shin to sort out his state of mind, causing his state of mind to sublimate and transform. Now, he planned to return to the Star Chess Sea and wait for the 9 regions battle. Come out. It was late at night, and Lin Sun, who was walking alone in the sea of clouds above a vast mountain range, suddenly stopped and looked behind him. In the sea of clouds, a gray-haired, skinny old man in a black robe with a straight back suddenly appeared. Young friend, please don't misunderstand. I am from the heaven-reaching sword sect, and I have only one thing to discuss with you. The old man in black spoke calmly, without any aggressive intention. He was obviously a sword saint. Although his aura was restrained, the invisible power was still there. Oh, what is it? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. He stood there casually, but the qi in his body had been completely operated to the extreme. I have no other wish. I only hope that you will leave the heaven-reaching sword behind. The old man in black cupped his hands and said, If you agree, I can represent the heaven-reaching sword sect and resolve the old scores with you. Lin Sun asked in reply, What if I don't agree? The old man in black fell into silence. After a long time, he said, Young friend, you should know that this is a good opportunity to resolve the score. Lin Sun sneered. In the past, your heaven-reaching sword sect has dealt with me more than once. Logically speaking, it should be me who hates you. Why is it you who is forgiving me now? The black-clothed old man's face sank. A cold glint flashed in his eyes as he said, Young friend, please reconsider. The prestige that you possess now is indeed unparalleled. However, if you think that you can disregard everything with just this prestige, then you are gravely mistaken. Lin Sun stopped smiling and said, You should know that I am never afraid of any threat. You want the heaven-reaching sword? It's easy. Just do it. The old man in black looked uncertain. He stared at Lin Sun for a long time and finally sighed, Well, you can go. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed, and he was a little surprised. I obtained this sword from Yun Qinbai. He is already dead now. However, I know that he died unwillingly. Given the old man's attitude, Lin Sun decided to explain again. He looked calm, neither sad nor happy. Although he and I are mortal enemies, I will use this sword to pay tribute to his soul one day. After that, he floated away. In Lin Sun's mind, Yun Qinbai was an opponent who deserved to die, but he was also an opponent whom Lin Sun had to respect. He was a tragic and peerless figure. Sometimes, if Lin Sun was in Yun Qingbai's situation and had no choice from the first day of cultivation, he might not be able to do better than Yun Qinbai. The old man in black watched Lin Sun's figure gradually go away. Finally, he resisted the urge to do it and sighed softly. Ancestor, why didn't you stop him? Some figures swept out from the nearby area, all looking puzzled. Why do you think he dares to go alone? The old man in black asked in reply. Everyone was stunned. If he didn't have something to rely on, how could he dare to refuse me so forcefully? The old man's expression was complicated. He was a sword sage who had been in seclusion for a long time, but for the first time in his life, he chose to forbear in front of a younger generation and gave up the intention to take action. It was not because he was too cautious, but because he had made a judgment that even if he took action, he had no confidence to stop Lin Sun. There are talents in every generation. It's a pity. If Yun Qinbai was still alive, his achievements would not be inferior to Lin Sun's. What a pity! The old man in black strode away with his hands behind his back. His figure was bleak and his interest waned. Others looked at each other. They didn't understand and were still unwilling to accept it. This might be the gap between them and the old man in black. Several hours later, it was just before dawn. Lin Sun, who was walking over a mountain stream, stopped again. This time, he couldn't help frowning and muttering to himself, "It's really haunting." As he spoke, he turned around and looked into the darkness in the distance. His black eyes were like lightning, cold and frightening. Chapter 1508. In the darkness, a little light of Buddha lit up. Then, a skinny monk with white eyebrows hanging down from both sides of his face stepped out of the darkness. With one step, he came to Lin Sun about 30 meters away. "Fa Lin of Ksitigarbha Temple greets you, my young friend." The old monk looked haggard. He put his palms together and showed no sadness or joy. Lin Sun's black hair and clothes were fluttering without wind. His chi rose to an unprecedented level at this moment. He said calmly, "Old monk, what are you going to do?" "My young friend, you are going to the 9 regions battlefield. Why don't you take this opportunity to leave the Dharma scripture and the Bodhi wood, so as not to lose them in the battlefield?" The old monk Farron spoke calmly. "Lose them? Do you think I can't come back alive from the 9 regions battlefield?" Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. Ksitigarbha Temple. How could he forget this orthodoxy? In the past, he had been chased by the strong of this orthodoxy, such as Gu Fozi, Ksitigarbha 18 sons, and Fa Jing. The reason was simple. The Ksitigarbha Temple regarded Lin Sun as a heretic and wanted to kill him. "No one can say whether I'm alive or not." Fa Lin's expression was calm and dignified. As he spoke, the heavens and the earth suddenly changed. It was as if the heavens and the earth had been transformed into a mystery realm that was isolated from the outside world. Here, the light of Buddha was vast and the sound of Sanskrit resounded. Fa Lin stood there like a Buddha that had descended to the world, and his entire body emanated boundless majesty. "My young friend, lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha." He chanted the name of Buddha. His voice was like a bell, stirring people's hearts. If it were someone else, he would have been frightened and lost his mind. But Lin Sun didn't. The holy monk Duji once said, "If I am a Buddha, there will be no demons in the world. If I am a demon, I will make all Buddhas in the world a demon. Today, I want to see if I can make you transcend the world." Lin Sun looked calmer. Fa Lin was a figure of the saint realm, and the breath he exuded was more terrible than that of the saint realm. It was very likely that he was a great saint, but Lin Sun was still not afraid. As the black-clothed old man of the heaven-reaching sword sect speculated, Lin Sun dared to go alone, so he naturally had something to rely on. Fa Lin raised his eyes, looked at Lin Sun and said, "My young friend, if you have obsession in your heart, you will become a devil. There is no turning back. Please think twice." He looked solemn and dignified. But the more it was like this, the more disgusted Lin Sun was. These old bald donkeys of Ksitigarbha Temple could even talk about robbery in such a dignified and righteous way. They were shameless to the extreme. He frowned and said, "Since there's no turning back, there's no need to turn back. Be more straightforward. If you want to rob, just do it." Fa Lin sighed softly. Then, he stretched out a hand and held it in the air. This simple movement made Lin Sun stiff all over. Aware of the fatal danger, he exerted his strength without hesitation and was about to crush a token hidden in his hand. But at this moment, 5,000 kilometers away, a voice suddenly resounded high up in the sky. Quick! A wisp of sword light flashed out abruptly, and it was like a comet that dragged a green ray of light behind it as it tore through the sky. The sword chi was vast, and it slashed apart a part of the sky and a part of the mountains and rivers. Then, it broke the boundary of the secret realm. The sword light dragged by the sword chi tore a long crack in the sky, which didn't disappear for a long time. Fa Lin's white brows furrowed. He was the one who opened the barrier, and it represented his divine might. Yet now, an opening had been easily sliced open. Immediately, he narrowed his eyes and felt the terrible will imprinted in this sword. If he hadn't defended himself with his chi, the place where he stood would have been crushed and collapsed. Then, Fa Lin said in a deep voice, "Who interfered in the business of Ksitigarbha Temple? Don't you know the rule that intruders will be killed in the boundary? Old bald donkey, you don't look like a monk with such strong killing intent." Loud laughter came from a distance. But as soon as the voice sounded, an old man in a Taoist robe riding a green donkey appeared here. The green donkey was emaciated and lazy, and it frequently sneezed as it glanced at Fa Lin with its eyes. Its lips parted to reveal a mouthful of snow-white teeth, and it seemed to be ridiculing Fa Lin. The old man that sat on the green donkey had disheveled hair, dirty clothes, and an intoxicated expression, causing him to seem lazy and slovenly. He held a yellow-skinned gourd in his hand. As soon as he arrived, the green sword chi was like a swimming fish that flashed happily into the yellow-skinned gourd. Drunken Sword Senior? Fa Lin's expression had already become serious. A very long time ago, there was a peerlessly talented sword saint that rode a green donkey and carried a gourd as he wandered the world. He passed through 13 places of seclusion and defeated numerous great figures of the sword Tao. He was matchless. This person was addicted to the sword, wine, and battle. He had a wild disposition and acted in an unrestrained manner, yet no one knew his origins. All they knew was that his sword Tao could be described as being vast like the heavens and unstoppable. As an old man who had lived for countless years, Fa Lin had naturally heard of the deeds of Drunken Sword Senior. The old man in the Taoist robe burped, and his eyes were blurred. He swayed on the green donkey and laughed. "Old bald donkey, you also know me? That's good, so I don't have to be long-winded. In short, disappear quickly, or my sword won't have eyes." Although it was a threat, his tone was lazy and weak, without the slightest bit of deterrence. But Fa Lin looked more and more solemn, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. He put his palms together and said, "I heard that Drunken Sword Senior's attainments in Sword Tao were once the best in an era. I'd like to have a try." The old man in the Taoist robe turned his head to look at Lin Sun and said with a smile, "Little guy, just go ahead. Don't pay any attention to the demons and ghosts along the way." After thinking for a while, he added, "In this world, some people want you to die and can't tolerate you, but there are also people who won't let you die. You have to believe that there are still many good people, such as me." "Ha ha ha ha." He laughed and said, good people, just because of these 2 words, I have to drink to my heart's content." The old Taoist raised the yellow-skinned gourd and gulped it down. "Thank you, Senior." Lin Sun put away the token in his hand and cupped his hands. Go ahead boldly." The old Taoist waved his sleeves. Lin Sun glanced at Fa Lin, who stared at the old man in the Taoist robe with a dignified look, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Lin Sun suddenly realized that Fa Lin had met a tough opponent. "Senior, is Drunken Sword Senior really your name?" Lin Sun couldn't help asking before leaving. "Wrong, it's just a nickname. How about it? Don't you think it's awesome?" The old Taoist was triumphant. "The cheapest? Cheap mouth? This nickname is really awesome." Lin Sun murmured and turned away. The drunk old Taoist was stunned at first, and then his old face suddenly fell as black as the bottom of a pot. He roared, "Damn, no wonder those old guys always like to call my nickname from time to time. It turns out that they're all laughing at me." Immediately, he turned his face and stared at Fa Lin unkindly. He gnashed his teeth and said, "When you called me by my nickname just now, were you also laughing at me?" Before Fa Lin could say anything, the old Taoist had already stood up from the green donkey. "I'll kill you, you bald donkey." Boom! A monstrous sword chi rushed out from his body, tearing the night sky and illuminating thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. Far away, Lin Sun looked back and saw this scene. He was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. He thought to himself that although the Drunken Sword Senior's nickname was unpleasant to the ear, his sword chi was really frightening. While thinking, he walked forward and carefully pondered the words of the Drunken Sword Senior just now. Go ahead boldly without paying attention to the demons and ghosts along the way? Lin soon vaguely guessed something and couldn't help sighing with emotion in his heart. Without any hesitation, he continued to move forward. One day later, in a city, Lin Sun was resting in a tea-house. At the table beside him, there was a handsome young man in ancient clothes. I've followed you all the way and seen the battle between the Drunken Sword Senior and Fa Lin of the Xitigarbha Temple. Someone secretly stopped me on the way, but unfortunately, that guy failed to stop me. The man looked at Lin Sun with a smile, with loose sleeves and a wide belt. Now, it seems that no one can help you. Why don't you come with me? Who are you? Lin Sun asked. You'll know if you come with me. As he spoke, the man raised his right hand and tried to grab Lin Sun's arm. But halfway, his arm was blocked by a white and slender palm and couldn't move any further. He's Xiao Yao from the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. He's an old bastard who has lived for many years, but he dresses like a young man. It can be seen how shameless he is. A low voice that was cold like ice and pleasing to the ear resounded out, and then a white-haired beautiful woman in azure clothes had suddenly appeared. The man called Xiao Yao was stunned and smiled bitterly. I thought there was no one else. I didn't expect that even the great-grandmother of the headmaster of the Wutian sect would come. Well, I admit defeat. I'll go now. The white-haired woman said coldly, You want to leave now? It's too late. If I don't beat you up, I'll feel sorry for chasing you all the way here. As she said, she grabbed the lapel of Xiao Yao's clothes and disappeared with a flash. Lin Sun watched all this in a daze. After a long time, he let out a long breath and said to himself, The Drunken Sword Senior is right. There are many good people in the world. Big brother, were they performing magic just now? They just disappeared in a flash. It's amazing. A little girl in the tea-house ran over with a face full of amazement. Lin Sun smiled and said, Is it amazing? Then I'll perform a magic trick for you too. Whoosh! As he finished speaking, his figure flashed and disappeared as well. Unbeknownst to him, the little girl burst into tears after being stunned for a while. It's not a magic trick at all. Mother, is it because I always lie to you that I ran into ghosts today? And I even ran into 3 ghosts at once. It's too scary. Boo-hoo. At this time, Lin Sun had already left the small city. For the next period of time, he trekked through the mountains and rivers, approaching the area where the Star Chess Sea was. It was a peaceful journey. However, Lin Sun knew that along the way, many unusual things were destined to happen in the darkness that he couldn't detect. Someone wanted to deal with him, and someone was protecting him. Why was it like this? Chapter 1509. Someone wanted to deal with him, which had something to do with the battle in Seoul Refining Tower in White Jade Capital and the upcoming battle between the 9 regions. This was Lin's inference. But what made him sigh with emotion was that the general trend of the world had changed. At least now there were people who didn't want to see him suffer. For example, the drunken sword old man who rode a green donkey and carried a gourd. For example, the white-haired beautiful woman who was called the great-grandmother of the headless sect by Xiao Yao of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. For example, the immortals who had been secretly resisting disasters for him along the way. His enemies were destined to be those who had made enemies with him in the past, such as the Heaven-Reaching Sword Sect, the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, the Black Sea Dog Tribe, the Golden Crow Tribe, the Sea Spirit Tribe, the Xuandu Taoism Sect, the Beasts Mountain, and so on. But Lin couldn't make a specific judgment for the time being as to who helped him. Doing good deeds without leaving their names? Thinking of this, Lin couldn't help but think of what the drunken sword old man had said, just go forward boldly. Magic Pavilion. Mr. Shen opened the scroll and read leisurely, enjoying himself. On one side, Miao Xian let out a cold snort and said, "As you expected, many idiots jumped out along the way. Do they want to kill him?" Mr. Shin smiled and said, "This is hatred. Those ancient orthodoxies don't think that Lin Sun can turn the tide in the Nine Regions battlefield. If it weren't for the general trend of the world, they would be more unscrupulous." Miao Xian sighed softly. No egg can remain intact under the collapse of the nest. Even if there is a great hatred, can't it be solved later? Miao Xian closed the scroll in his hand and said with clear eyes, "Because they are in a hurry. If they don't kill him now, I'm afraid there won't be many chances in the future." Miao Xian was stunned and immediately understood. He nodded and said, "That's true. Today, Lin Sun was almost invincible under the Saint Realm. He had a strong foundation and superb talent. He could influence the world by himself, which was enough to make those old monsters in the ancient Desolation Realm desperate. With Lin Sun's aptitude, he was destined to become a saint after entering the Nine-region battlefield without any accident. The Saint Realm. The meaning of these 4 words was enough to make those Saint Realm old monsters in the ancient Desolation Realm tremble in fear. What was more, with the foundation and combat power Lin Sun showed now, even if he was at the peak of becoming a saint, he was definitely not an ordinary peak saint. At that time, who among the ancient sects in the ancient Desolation territory would dare to deal with Lin Sun like this? If we don't kill Lin Sun now, when he returns from the Nine-region battlefield, these ancient orthodoxies will be unable to eat and sleep in peace." Mr. Shin said calmly, "If they don't want to be punished by Lin Sun in the future, they can only seize this last opportunity and stake everything on one throw." Mr. Miao Xian let out a long sigh. He seemed to have thought of something and said, "Senior brother, what do you think are the chances of this child returning alive from the Nine-region battlefield?" Mr. Shin thought for a while and said, "It's hard to say. But I'm sure that if he can survive in the Nine Zones battlefield, when he returns, even the sages in the ancient Desolation Realm will have to bow their heads to him." Miao Xian narrowed his eyes. He took out the spring and autumn brush and the book of annals, intending to record them down. Mr. Shin said helplessly, "Don't remember this. It's just a chat between you and me." Mr. Miao Xian thought for a while, put away the book and pen, and asked, "Senior brother, will he really be safe along the way?" Mr. Shin laughed and counted with his fingers. "Drunken sword old man, Lu Wutian, Yi Jiuxiao, Xiao Bugui, Wei Tsangyan." He read out a long list of names at once, and then said, "With so many old guys working together, it's hard for him to lose even a hair." Miao Xian couldn't help laughing. He knew that all this was arranged by his senior brother. After the end of the battle in White Jade Capital, his senior brother seemed to have expected this, so he set up a lot of backup plans. Mr. Miao Xian asked, "Senior brother, one last question. Why do you attach so much importance to this child?" Mr. Shin was silent for a long time, and then said, "If there is a glimmer of hope to reverse the defeat of the ancient Desolation Realm in the Nine-region battlefield, this glimmer of hope lies in this child." Miao Xian was stunned and shocked. A few days later, the vast star-chest sea was shrouded in thick fog, and many islands were scattered on the surface of the sea, faintly discernible in the fog. When Lin Sun arrived here, the tightness in his heart loosened. He turned to look at the road he came from, and there was no one around. However, Lin Sun cupped his hands and said with a solemn expression, "Thank you, seniors, for seeing me off. I will remember this great kindness and will never forget it." After saying that, there was no response in the vast wilderness. Lin Sun smiled and turned to the distant star-chest sea. In the darkness that Lin Sun couldn't detect, an old man said to himself, "This can be considered as sowing good karma for all living beings in the ancient Desolation Realm. Take care, young master." When Lin Sun's figure entered the star-chest sea, the old man's figure suddenly blended into the void and disappeared. Failed? On this day, ancient orthodoxies such as the Heavens Pivot Holy Land, the Black Sea Dog race, the Golden Crow race, the Xuandu Orthodoxy, the Sacred Fire Sect, and so on, learned that Lin Sun had returned to the Star Chess Sea safely. For a time, many important figures in these orthodoxies were enraged. "It's over. I'm afraid there won't be such a good opportunity to kill this lad in the future." Someone sighed. "I hope that this lad dies in the Nine Regions battlefield. Otherwise, if he returns alive, who will be able to deal with him in the future?" Someone was deeply worried. All of these things happened in the dark, and almost no one in the world noticed it. However, the ancient orthodoxies were well aware that the actions taken by those orthodoxies that wished for nothing more than Lin Sun's death had failed again. After returning to the Star Chess Sea, Lin Sun began to cultivate in silence. The old toad was still in seclusion, and Lin Sun didn't disturb it. However, he was a little worried. He didn't know when Zhao Jingxian would rush over to meet up with him. In the following days, Lin Sun honed his cultivation while using the Tao of stone carvings to demonstrate his own Tao. As the days passed, stone statues gradually piled up around him. These stone statues were lifelike and filled with the indescribable charm of the Great Way. Each of them could be seen as the embodiment of Lin Sun's own Tao. Carving the stone statues was like reconstructing one's Tao over and over again. They were filled with Lin Sun's understanding of the Great Way. Therefore, the aura of each stone statue was completely different. During this process, although Lin Sun's realm didn't change, his understanding of the Great Way was extremely precipitated. The stronger the accumulation, the more amazing the sublimation would be when it erupted. The only shortcoming was that each stone statue lacked a pair of eyes. That pair of eyes was the opportunity to prove Tao and become a saint. In short, Lin Sun had reached the peak of perfection on the path of immortality. Now, he only needed an opportunity. An opportunity to become a saint. 3 months later, news spread that Emperor Xiaohao triggered the Tao tribulation to become a saint. He slashed the 9 heavens' divine thunder, broke through thousands of miles of tribulation clouds, and became a saint at the peak. As soon as the news came out, the entire ancient desolation was shocked. It could be said that Emperor Xiaohao was the only person who had become a saint at the peak since the 3 taboo Tao tribulations descended above the ancient desolation. Who wouldn't pay attention to such a big event? Compared with the disturbance caused by Lin Sun defeating the alien enemies in the White Jade Jing 3 months ago, Emperor Xiaohao's feat of becoming a saint at the peak was undoubtedly more sensational. Haha, as long as there is a saint at the peak, the ancient desolation will finally see some hope in this battle of the 9 regions. Many overmatches were cheering. Emperor Xiaohao suddenly became the sun in the world's eyes, with immeasurable power. Below the saint realm, everyone was like an ant. Compared with the path of immortality, the saint realm was completely different. Emperor Xiaohao became a saint at one stroke, which meant that he stood out among the top figures and was completely different from the others. However, before the uproar caused by Emperor Xiaohao died down, another news came out that Fairy Ruowu, a descendant of the vermilion bird, triggered the Tao tribulation to become a saint and stepped into the saint realm. For a moment, the entire ancient desolation was boiling. With the coming battle of the 9 regions, peerless figures like Emperor Xiaohao and Fairy Ruowu stepped into the saint realm one after another. How could people not be excited? That's the second one. Some ancient orthodoxies sighed with emotion. They realized that the ancient desolation was indeed different from the past under such a great background. People couldn't help but look forward to whether the ancient desolation would be able to change its fate after the battle of the 9 regions. I wonder when Demon Lin will make a breakthrough and step into the saint realm? Many people thought of Lin Sun. Because in terms of foundation, combat capability, and talent, Lin Sun was not inferior to Emperor Xiaohao and Fairy Ruowu at all. But it was a pity that no one became a saint in the future, and Lin Sun was no exception. In the past, Demon Lin was the most outstanding cultivator in the same realm. But now, Emperor Xiaohao and Fairy Ruowu are the 2 peerless talents. They are neck and neck with each other. After all, Lin Sun is a whole realm lower than them. It's a world of difference. They can't be compared anymore. Indeed. When the Battle of the Nine Regions opens, the ancient desolation will definitely follow Emperor Xiaohao and Fairy Ruo Wu's lead. Such discussions took place in different areas of the ancient desolation. However, it didn't affect Lin Sun at all. He was cultivating in seclusion in the Star Chess Sea and was almost isolated from the world. Naturally, he didn't know about such news. Time passed. Unknowingly, a year had passed since he returned to the Star Chess Sea to cultivate. In this year, many major events happened in the ancient desolation. For example, all the ancient orthodoxies started to gather their strength to prepare for the upcoming Battle of the Nine Regions. For example, there were peerless figures who failed to reach the Saint Realm and died, causing many people to sigh. On this day, Lin Sun sat on the peak of an island and was carving a stone statue. He looked casual and relaxed. He held a carving knife in his hand and danced in the air. Chapter 15:10. On the coast, Zhao Jingxian stood alone. She was dressed in a simple and elegant dress, and her black hair was like a waterfall. She looked like a fairy. Her eyebrows and eyes were picturesque, and her facial features were pure and beautiful. As if she'd noticed Lin's gaze, a trace of a smile appeared on the corners of her moist lips, and then she waved her hand and said, "Long time no see, demon god Lin." Her voice was crisp and sweet, like a wind chime, drifting over the misty sea. Then, Lin Sun came over on the sea, his clothes fluttering in the wind. He was elegant and charming. Zhao Jingxuan's clear eyes were as bright as stars. She smiled, and a touch of tenderness surged in her heart. She had thought of this guy more than once in the past year. To Zhao Jingxuan's surprise, Lin Sun gave her a big hug as soon as he came over. Her body was stiff at first, and then she softened in the strong embrace. "Welcome back." Lin Sun's laughter rang in her ears. Hot air went into her ears, making her feel itchy. Zhao Jingxuan's pretty face was immediately dyed red by the sunset glow, which made her bright and shy. At this time, Zhao Jingxian suddenly found that Lin Sun seemed to be different from before. At least, he had never been so active before. She didn't know that during the month when he followed Mr. Shun to carve the stone statue, Lin Sun faced all kinds of feelings in his heart for the first time and learned how to face and accept them. But anyway, Zhao Jingxian was still very happy about Lin Sun's change. It was as if she saw a piece of elm suddenly enlightened. On the island, Lin Sun and Zhao Jingxian sat side by side, talking about everything under the sun. In the distance, the sea was rolling, the mist was curling up, and everything was quiet. It turns out that Xiaohao and Fairy Ruo have become sages. When he heard the news, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing with emotion. "Are you very disappointed?" Zhao Jingxuan's eyes were as clear as stars, staring at Lin Sun's side face. Lin Sun smiled and said, "What's there to be disappointed about? I have never thought of competing with them. After all, we pursue different Tao and have different opportunities to prove our Tao. But they are one step ahead of you." Zhao Jingxian seemed to want to see whether Lin Sun would show some frustration and anxiety. But from the beginning to the end, Lin Sun was calm and collected. Obviously, he really didn't care about these things, which made Zhao Jingxian admire him. This guy's state of mind was really different from before. "By the way, I heard that the Nine Regions battlefield will open soon." Suddenly, Zhao Jingxian remembered something. "The Battle of the Nine Regions is coming forward?" Lin Sun was shocked. Zhao Jingxian said, "That's right. It won't be long before the Star Chess Sea becomes lively, because there is a path to the Nine Regions battlefield on the Undying God Mountain at the end of the sea." Next, Zhao Jingxian told Lin Sun some news about the Nine Regions battlefield one by one. Even Lin Sun heard some news for the first time. In the Nine Regions battlefield, other than the enemies of the 8 regions, there were also many strange and dangerous things. Moreover, there were many secret realms in the Nine Regions battlefield. Some of these secret realms were extremely dangerous, and anyone who entered would definitely die. There were also some secret realms that contained unimaginably shocking opportunities. Moreover, the laws of the 9 regions battlefield were extremely special. Powers beyond the scope of the Saint Realm would be suppressed and unable to be used. For example, some forbidden treasures and powers beyond the Saint Realm would be absolutely suppressed by the laws of heaven and earth, even if they could be brought into the 9 regions battlefield. And in short, Lin Sun kept all of this in mind. Less than a month after Zhao Jingxian arrived at the Star Chess Sea, Alu also came. He carried an iron rod and rode on a giant black dragon that he had caught out of nowhere. At first glance, Lin Sun was stunned, because Alu had changed. His muscular and majestic body had become much thinner than before. Although his skin was still bronze-colored, Alu, who had become thinner, looked quite handsome. His facial features were sharp as if they were carved by a knife. "Big brother, aren't you afraid that I'll be shy when you look at me like this?" Alu's voice was still extremely rough and careless. He didn't look shy at all. Instead, he sounded a little proud, as if he was very satisfied with the surprise in Lin Sun's eyes. "Bah!" The old toad came over and spat fiercely. This fellow had also just woken up from seclusion not too long ago. "You used to be so domineering and masculine. How come you've become more and more like a woman now?" Alu's eyes widened and he straightaway started spitting, spittle flying all over old Toad's face. Lin Sun was already used to the fact that they would quarrel with each other as soon as they met. 2 months after Alu's arrival, the large black bird that carried a black walk on its back had arrived as well. As soon as it arrived, it clamored complacently. "I, Grandpa Bird, will definitely take the lead in the battle between the 9 territories this time and crush all my enemies." Clang! First, Alu used his iron rod to smash the black walk on the big black bird's back so hard that it almost flew out. Then, old Toad stepped forward, slapped the big black bird, and scolded, "In front of this king, how can you be coquettish?" The large black bird was dazed. Never had it imagined that it would receive such special treatment as soon as it arrived, and it instantly became exasperated and cried out loudly. In the distance, Lin Sun couldn't help but laugh. Now that Zhao Jingxian, Alu, Old Toad, and the large blackbird were all here, it was as if Lin Sun had returned to the time when he was in the absolute summit domain, and he had the feeling that he was no longer alone. Another 3 months passed. On this day, Lin Sun was meditating when he suddenly had a strange feeling. Then, he stood up abruptly and saw that in the vast Star Chess Sea, the power of the heavenly cycle star formation that had originally covered the surroundings was tumbling violently at this moment. Then, the taboo power of the entire formation began to fade gradually. At the same time, on the other side of the Star Chess Sea, on the immortal God Mountain, a boundless horn sounded and reverberated between heaven and earth. The horn sounded as if it came from ancient times. It was impassioned, vigorous, and made people's blood boil. The battle between the 9 territories is about to begin? Zhao Jingxian, Old Toad, Alu, and the large blackbird were also alarmed. On this day, in different parts of the ancient Desolation Realm, in some forbidden lands like the immortal God Mountain, the boundless and impassioned horn sounded. For a moment the world was in turmoil. The battle horn. This is the sound of the battle horn. Some experts of the older generation shouted excitedly. A long time ago, every time the 9 territories battlefield opened, the battle horn would sound to summon the heroes of the world to fight on the battlefield. This was a sign that the 9 territories battlefield was about to open. It's finally here. It's several years earlier than expected, someone murmured with excitement. Prepare for today. Everyone, it's up to you to avenge the ancient Desolation Realm and defeat the enemies of the 8 territories. You must win. No matter how small the hope is, don't give up. In the past, many powerful sages shed their blood to prevent the ancient Desolation Realm from being invaded by the 8 territories. This time, I hope you won't let the people of the ancient desolation realm down. In countless ancient orthodoxies, such impassioned words were heard. A few years ago, they had already made the necessary preparations and were only waiting for today. Woo, woo, woo! The boundless horn gradually began to resound over the entire ancient desolation realm. The cultivators scattered around the world were also alarmed. It's finally here. Emperor Xiaohao's purple robe fluttered in the wind. His body emitted a monstrous sage aura that could devour mountains and rivers. Let's go. Fairy Ruowu turned into a fiery red vermilion bird and teleported away. On this day, a group of top cultivators walked out from different areas and headed for the passage to the Nine Territories battlefield. Yuan Fatian, the young golden-winged rock king, Qi Lingxiao, Mi Hengzhen, Yi Mof, and so on. On this day, many sages from countless ancient orthodoxies led their elite forces to the battlefield. On this day, the vast ancient desolation realm was like a giant beast that had awakened from its slumber. It was filled with unprecedented battle intent. In this great era, everything in the ancient desolation realm changed. It was also in this great era that a large number of peerless figures emerged. Now, it all depended on whether the ancient desolation realm could avenge itself and defeat the enemies from all directions. In the divine secret pavilion, Mr. Shen stood alone on a cliff, his robe fluttering in the wind. He was silent. The great era is a chaotic era. Whether the ancient desolation realm can survive or not depends on the battle of the Nine Territories, he murmured in his heart. Boom! Suddenly, a strand of terrifying light of the Tao that covered the heavens and the earth suddenly converged in the sky, and it transformed into an extremely dignified and cold face. The face's eyes were vast like the starry sky, and the phenomena of the universe changing floated within it. His eyes fell on Mr. Shen, and his voice sounded like the sonorous voice of the Great Way. The battle of the Nine Territories has begun. The front line is destined to break out into a full-scale battle. Let me ask you, is the ancient desolation realm ready for a life-and-death battle? If Lin Sun was here, he would definitely recognize that it was Bai Yujing, a powerful cultivator who was stationed on the front line of the ancient desolation realm all year round. Of course. Mr. Shen's voice was calm but determined. Then what are you going to do? Bai Yujing asked again. How about I go to the front line with you? Mr. Shen said slowly. You're finally going to make a move. Bai Yujing showed a rare look of excitement. He knew that as long as Mr. Shen went to the front line, he would be able to play the role of a stabilizing force. All the experts who had stepped into the Emperor-to-be realm knew how terrifying Mr. Shen of the Divine Secret Pavilion was. He hadn't made a move for a long time. But when he decided to make a move, no Emperor-to-be in the ancient desolation realm dared to doubt his ability. Let's go. Mr. Shen stepped into the void and rose up. At that moment, he seemed to have taken off his gentle clothes and revealed the peerless sharpness that had been hidden in his body for countless years. His aura was completely different. He made the world roar and all things bow their heads. In the divine secret pavilion, Miao Xian was in a trance. After so many years, senior brother was finally going to make a move. Chapter 1511. Back then, Lin Sun had killed a group of sages outside Snow Mulberry City with the Buddha heart of slaughter, shocking the world and the ancient desolation realm. It was also after the Saint-Killing battle that a portion of Quasi-Emperor White Jing's will descended on the battlefield and said, when the Nine-region battlefield opens, if Lin Sun doesn't go to kill enemies to atone for his sins, Bai Yujing will be the first to kill him. At this time, the horn of war had sounded in the ancient desolation realm, and the Nine-region battlefield was about to open. Mr. Shen was slightly surprised that Bai Yujing, a big shot of Quasi-Emperor, still remembered Lin Sun. You, White Jing, are a peerless hero and an extraordinary overlord. Your breadth of mind and boldness far surpass ordinary people, yet you actually hate a junior? Mr. Shen asked. Humph. He killed so many sages and consumed the strength of the ancient Desolation realm. How can I be indifferent? Bai Yujing snorted coldly. Some people deserve to die, Mr. Shen said lightly. Mr. Shen said lightly, it's not worth it to stand up for them. Bai Yujing said calmly, even if they die, it's better to let them die on the front line than to die in the hands of a little guy. Mr. Shen couldn't help laughing. He knew that Bai Yujing had no prejudice against Lin Sun and was just complaining. Brother Bai, don't worry. Lin Sun will definitely go to the 9-region battlefield this time. Miao Xian, who was in the distance, said loudly. If he has the ability, he'd better not die. Otherwise, I will look down on him. After White Jade Jing said this, he broke through the sky and left. Miao Xian, I'll leave the matter of the divine secret pavilion to you. Mr. Shen cupped his hands. Take care, brother. Miao Xian also cupped his hands. I'm leaving. Mr. Shen waved his sleeves and stepped into the void, disappearing in a flash. It was as if he was invisible and unfathomable. The Immortal God Mountain. Although the name of the mountain had the word death in it, its charm and the mountain were completely different. The mountain was majestic and majestic, like a winding dragon, and it was as black jade. It had the momentum of uprooting the earth and the posture of holding up the sun. Its entire body was overflowing with an immortal and sacred aura. Back then, Lin Sun had participated in the Junior Tycoon ranking here. He defeated all his opponents and won the first place. It was also on the Immortal God Mountain that he comprehended the mysteries of the Tao of Undying. On this day, as the battle horn sounded in the vast expanse, Lin Sun, Zhao Jingxian, Old Toad, Alu, and the Big Black Bird crossed the Star-Chess Sea and arrived at the Immortal God Mountain once again. Woo woo woo, the battle horn sounded from the top of the mountain and reverberated in all directions. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the void above the mountain. The void turned into a whirlpool. It was a shocking scene. You're here. An illusory old figure appeared, exuding a frightening law fluctuation aura. They were formed from the will of the Immortal God Mountain, and called themselves Spirit Servants. Lin Sun and the others had met him when they participated in the Junior Tycoon list, so they were familiar with each other. That's the passage to the 9 regions battlefield. The Spirit Servant pointed at the sky above the peak of the mountain. Amidst the surging wind and lightning, a door of light and shadow could be faintly seen condensing into form. Once you enter, you'll be teleported to the 9 regions battlefield and participate in the battle between the strong of the 9 regions. There are no rules to speak of. Whoever survives to the end will be the final winner. I think you all know that the ancient Desolation realm suffered a crushing defeat in the previous 2 battles of the 9 regions. This time, I hope you can all come back alive. The voice of the Spirit Servant was still as empty and emotionless as before. Speaking of this, the Spirit Servant waved his sleeve, and 5 tokens with a metallic luster appeared in front of Lin Sun and the others one by one. Inject your own will into them. When the 9 regions battlefield closes, you can be teleported back to the ancient Desolation realm with this token in your hand, provided that you're still alive at that time. The Spirit Servant said slowly. In addition, this token represents your identity, and it can be used to accumulate achievement points for killing enemies. The more enemies you kill, the more achievement points you'll accumulate. What's the use of achievement points? Old Toad couldn't help interrupting. To exchange for God-given luck. The Spirit Servant continued, you've participated in the minor tycoon rankings in the past, so you should know that this Undying God Mountain is covered with the true Great Tao karmic energy. If you can return alive, you can use your accumulated achievement points to exchange for the corresponding Great Tao karmic energy. Lin Sun and the others finally understood. The Spirit Servant reminded them, however, you should know that in the previous 2 battles of the 9 regions, the ancient Desolation realm was defeated. Less than 10% of the strong warriors could return, so there are very few people who can exchange for the Great Way. Less than 10% of the strong warriors could return alive. Lin Sun and the others were all shocked. Senior, we still need a token. While Lin Sun said, Silver had already swept out of his sea of consciousness. The spirit servant waved his sleeve, and another token appeared, which he gave to Silver. Boom! At this moment, on the top of the mountain, amidst the raging wind and thunder, a gate had completely taken shape, shining brightly and illusory. Go, the spirit servant said. Lin Sun and the others nodded and flew to the top of the mountain. In the previous days, they had said all the things they should say to each other, and also told each other what they should do. Now they all began to move with a determined state of mind. Big brother, I'll go first. The old toad couldn't wait any longer. It was the first to rush into the door of nothingness, its figure disappearing in an instant. It's my turn. The big black bird flapped its wings and hurriedly followed him. Big brother, why don't you go first? Alu looked at Lin Sun with a smile, but Lin Sun kicked him into the void gate. Then he said to Zhao Jingxian with a smile, This guy has no sense at all. He doesn't know that I want to talk to you at this time. What can't you say? Why do you have to say it at this time? Zhao Jingxian tucked her hair behind her ears and glanced at him. It was just a look, but it was full of charm. Nothing, just, Lin Sun was about to say something, but Zhao Jingxian seemed to have guessed it. She interrupted him with a smile. Don't worry. If I'm in danger, I'll contact you immediately. Lin Sun smiled. That's good. You go first. Zhao Jingxian shook her head. You go first. Lin Sun also shook his head. You go first. Zhao Jingxian glared at him. I said you go first. Lin Sun suddenly grabbed Zhao Jingxuan's lapel and threw her into the illusory portal. Then he laughed. If you don't listen to me in the future, you'll get the same treatment. Zhao Jingxian shouted in shame and indignation, Lin, don't let me catch you. Before her voice died away, she had disappeared. Lin Sun's lips curled into a playful smile, then he stepped forward and stepped into the gate. Not long after they left, groups after groups of experts appeared near the immortal sacred mountain. Obviously, they were the same as Lin Sun and the others, who were going to enter the 9 regions battlefield. The spiritual servant gave each of them a token and watched them leave one by one. The same thing happened in different areas of the ancient desolation realm. The sages of the ancient orthodoxies, the top figures, they entered the 9 regions battlefield one after another from different channels. This kind of thing lasted for 3 days. Success or failure depends on this battle. We must win. We must. This battle affected the hearts of all the people in the world. As the channel to the 9 regions battlefield opened, countless strong people in the ancient desolation realm silently prayed for those who were going to fight. 9 regions battlefield. A blood-red world appeared in sight. The world was stained with blood and the wind was moaning. It was a vast expanse, revealing a solemn and stirring atmosphere. The ground was covered with a thick layer of gravel, which seemed to be soaked in red blood. After countless years of erosion, it was still poignant and bright red. Buzz. With a wave of void fluctuation, Lin Sun's figure was moved out. With a bang, his feet landed on the blood-red sand. In the flying sand, many broken corpses and bones were exposed on the ground, all of which had decayed. But in Lin Sun's sea of consciousness, he felt a kind of horrible and bloody murderous spirit coming to his face at this moment. It seemed that the sound of war drums and spears rang in his ears. In his field of vision, there seemed to be a tragic scene of mountains of corpses, seas of blood, and piles of white bones in the blood-red world. Lin Sun shook his head fiercely, and the vision in front of him all collapsed and disappeared. Only the whimpering sound echoed between heaven and earth. The blood-red sand and dust filled the air. Clatter. Lin Sun's divine awareness spread out. It seemed to be as calm as a flowing cloud, but in fact, he had already become cautious and cautious like a big bow pulled to the full at this moment. This was the 9 regions battlefield. From the moment he entered this place, he had to be careful. The sky above is full of strange heavenly gang evil chi, which is not suitable for flying. The law of the Great Way here is obscure and strange. It is firmer and clearer than that of the ancient desolation territory. In the spiritual chi, there are traces of chaotic divinity, which has an immeasurable effect on cultivation. But at the same time, there are a lot of mixed blood and filthy breaths distributed between heaven and earth. If you want to cultivate here, you must be alert to the danger of chi deviation. The perception range of divine awareness is 13,000 feet, so it is not suitable to sneak at full speed. In a moment, under the investigation of Lin Sun's huge divine awareness, many perceptions emerged in his mind like running water, so that he could make an accurate judgment of the current environment. For Lin Sun, the Nine Regions battlefield was a completely strange place. If he didn't get familiar with everything here as soon as possible, there would be many unexpected risks in the next action. However, Lin Sun wouldn't be restrained because of this. Perhaps there were unimaginable dangers in the Nine Regions battlefield, but he had already prepared for the worst. Years of fighting and the baptism of countless blood and fire had already sharpened Lin Sun's state of mind and will to a level far beyond imagination. Lin Sun even had a kind of hot blood and a surging desire for fighting in this battle, because he needed such a battlefield to realize his goal of becoming a saint. Chapter 15:12. Whoosh! With a wave of Lin Sun's sleeve, a green glow flew up like a stream of light, crisscrossing in the void and evolving into a Taoist restriction formation, covering the area where he was. In an instant, his whole body disappeared, and even his breath was concealed. This was a kind of breath-concealing formation. Before coming here, Lin Sun had also given Zhao Jingxian, Old Toad, Lu, and the Big Blackbird a set of formation discs. As long as they were taken out, they could conceal their breath. Unless they encountered a special secret method or a peak existence of the Saint Realm, other opponents were destined to not be able to detect a trace. After doing this, Lin Sun stretched out his hand and a token appeared in the void. Two of them were the flying token, which could accumulate merit and was a key item to enter the Kunlun ruins. One was the ancient desolation token, which was given by the spiritual servant of the immortal mountain. When the Nine-Region battlefield ended, one could use this token to teleport back to the ancient desolation domain. At the same time, the ancient desolation token also had the function of accumulating merit and could be used to exchange for the Great Way luck. The other was the soul-fixing talisman. Zhao Jingxian, Old Toad, Lu, and the Big Blackbird each had one. Activating the talisman with spiritual energy, they could sense the approximate location of others. Lin Sun put the flying token and the ancient desolation token on him one by one, then held the soul-fixing talisman in his palm and quietly activated it. Buzz! A pentagonal pattern was reflected on the soul-fixing talisman, shining brightly. Each corner represented the position of a person. When their positions shifted, every corner of the pattern would change. But in just a moment, Lin Sun's face darkened. The soul-fixing talisman had failed, and he couldn't locate Zhao Jingxian, Old Toad, Lu, and the Big Blackbird. Either the power of the law of heaven and earth in the Nine-Region battlefield interferes, or my current position is too far away from them. Lin Sun put away the soul-fixing talisman and made a judgment. Swish! Then, Lin Sun spread out an extremely simple map. This was the regional distribution map of the Nine-Region battlefield, drawn by Zhao Jingxian. In the past, there had been 2 battles between the Nine-Region battlefield, so it wasn't difficult to understand some of the regional distribution of the Nine-Region battlefield. On the map, there was a Jing grid, which could also be regarded as a 9-palace grid. Of the 9 realms, the territories of the other 8 realms were located in the 8 directions of the map. For example, the territory of the ancient All-Heaven region was directly north, and it belonged to the Li Palace of the 9 palaces. In the Nine-Region battlefield, it was called the All-Heaven realm, and it represented the territory of the All-Heaven ancient region. The city of Tao Protector had been constructed within the All-Heaven world, and it was the headquarters where the experts of the All-Heaven ancient region gathered. For example, the Blood Demon ancient realm was located in the northeast, and it belonged to the Palace of Earth of the Nine Palaces. It was called the Blood Demon realm, and it referred to the territory of the Blood Demon ancient realm. The situation in the other realms was the same. Every time the Battle of the Nine Regions began, the experts from the various camps who were teleported into the Nine Regions battlefield would immediately head to the place where their camps were located, thus achieving the goal of gathering strength and entering and exiting the battlefield together. The ancient Desolation realm was right in the center. This place was the central palace of the Nine Regions battlefield. It was regarded as the heart of the battlefield, and its location seemed to be extremely superior. But in all directions of the central palace, the enemy forces of the ancient Desolation realm were firmly trapped in the center, like an ambush from 8 sides. Just this position alone put the experts of the ancient Desolation realm at a disadvantage in the Battle of the Nine Regions. Being ambushed from 8 sides was equivalent to being attacked from 8 sides. Therefore, after the opening of the Nine Regions battlefield, the experts of the ancient Desolation realm were different from the experts of the other 8 realms. Almost none of them would choose to go to the ancient Desolation realm, which was located in the central area of the battlefield. Everyone knew that the foreign enemies of the 8 realms had an agreement to kill the ancient Desolation realm first, and then compete for superiority. If the experts of the ancient Desolation realm appeared in the ancient Desolation realm, they would definitely become the target of public criticism. For example, Lin Sun knew that the first choice of the experts of the ancient Desolation realm entering the Nine Regions battlefield this time was not to kill the enemy. Instead, it was to hide. Only by dispersing their strength could they avoid being attacked by the other 8 realms. Moreover, it was best to hide until the peak of becoming a saint. At that time, they might have the ability to wrestle with the other 8 realms. Of course, this choice was very depressing, but it was the reality. In the Nine Regions battlefield, face and dignity were no longer important. The most important thing was whether one could survive or not. Of course, this was only the general distribution of the Nine Regions battlefield. The Nine Regions battlefield was extremely vast, and each area was like a vast land. On this land there were many dangerous things, such as the Void Crack, the Evil Mist Swamp, the Blood Tide, and so on, were full of strange and ominous. In addition, there were many secret realms, like bubbles, dotted in different areas of the Nine Regions battlefield. Some secret realms, even if a saint entered, would definitely die. And some secret realms, there were unimaginably amazing things. Looking at the simple map in his hand, Lin Sun couldn't help but frown. The place where he was located was like a bloody desert, and it was impossible to determine where he was. Well, now I can only assess the situation and choose the right time to act. After thinking for a long time, Lin Sun waved his sleeve and removed the Taoist restriction formation. His figure flashed, and he rushed into the distance. Whoosh! In an instant, his whole body seemed to disappear into nothingness. His whole body was covered by the evil qi, which covered his whole breath. Lin Sun's movement was not fast, and he didn't fly in the air. Because the sky was covered with the terrible heavenly gang evil qi, even a saint would be blown away if he flew in it. Moreover, because the power of the divine awareness could only cover more than 3,000 feet, his speed was too fast. Once he encountered an accident, he was bound to be caught off guard. Lin Sun was sure that even a saint would not dare to casually use the void shift in the Nine Regions battlefield. Because maybe a void crack would appear, and it would be enough to swallow him up. 15 minutes later, at the end of the bloody desert, there was an endless black forest. The sky above the forest was covered with a thick bloody light, which was strange and creepy. Lin Sun looked around and only looked at the atmosphere, which made him feel frightened. This forest, covering the sky and the earth, was ancient and desolate, exuded a strange bloody smell, and even a kind of ferocious and gloomy feeling. It was as if it was not a forest, but a land of death. Don't enter a forest. This sentence meant that when you encountered a forest, you should be careful of dangers and ambushes. But for Lin Sun, he could make full use of the weird black forest in front of him. At least, after entering it, even if he encountered an irresistible enemy, there would be many opportunities to escape. After thinking for a moment, Lin Sun didn't hesitate and flashed into it. The forest was dark and gloomy. Ancient trees towered into the sky, and the ground was covered with a thick layer of rotten leaves. Vines as thick as buckets were wrapped around the branches of the trees like giant pythons lying on the ground. Lin Sun became extremely cautious as he shuttled through it. Crack! A quarter of an hour later, when Lin Sun sneaked for dozens of miles, his divine awareness suddenly captured a sound like the breaking of branches. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. In this strange dead forest, such a sudden movement, even if it was extremely subtle, seemed very unusual. After thinking for a while, he quietly moved to the place where the sound came from. After a while, Lin Sun's figure flashed and quietly flew to the depths of the branches of a big tree. He closed his eyes, and his divine awareness carefully penetrated through the branches and leaves to explore an area in the distance. Soon, he saw a figure. It was a woman who looked like a young girl, with blood-red hair, a cold face, and a vigilant look. She wore an animal skin armor. She had long dark green hair, and below her waist was a snake tail covered with golden scales. She looked like a snake person. Some information suddenly appeared in Lin Sun's mind. The Golden Snake Clan was one of the top 10 clans in the Blood Demon Ancient area. This clan was good at soul attacks, and they liked to devour and refine the souls of enemies to enhance their own cultivation. Therefore, they were called Spirit Eaters. There was no doubt that the young girl in armor was a descendant of the Golden Ink Snake Clan. At this time, the woman in armor was carefully crouching at the root of a big tree, holding a rough white bone saber in her hand, and gently cutting off a piece of thumb-thick root at the root of the tree. She looked very focused and solemn, as if she was facing a formidable enemy. Before long, a piece of root was cut off, and drops of golden juice flowed out of the broken root. The woman in armor carefully put it into a mutton fat bottle. The woman in armor breathed a long sigh of relief, stood up, and turned to leave. It didn't take long for her to find another target. It was an ancient tree with bare branches and leaves, like a dragon lying in a crouching position. Unlike other ancient trees nearby, this tree's old bark was cracked, and its trunk seemed to be made of bronze juice, with a metallic luster. Just like before, the woman in armor squatted down again, took out the white bone saber, and carefully cut off one of the roots. From beginning to end, she didn't notice that someone had been staring at her in the dark. It didn't take long for the woman in armor to collect drops of golden juice again, which made her smile involuntarily. Next, the woman in armor sneaked into this forest, and specially selected the ancient trees with branches and leaves that seemed to be made of bronze to collect the mysterious golden juice. In the dark, Lin Sun followed her like a shadow, quietly watching her, without disturbing her. In terms of understanding of the 9-region battlefield, the other 8 regions were far better than the ancient Desolation region. They knew all kinds of things in the 9-region battlefield. They also knew what opportunities and dangers were, what they should touch, and what they shouldn't touch. The reason was very simple. In the previous 2 battles of the 9-region battlefield, the other 8 regions, as the winners, had completely passed down the information about the 9-region battlefield. Even if countless years had passed, the information would still be known and mastered by later generations. The ancient Desolation region had suffered heavy losses in the previous 2 battles of the 9-region battlefield, and only a few could return from the battlefield alive. Naturally, it was impossible for them to completely pass down the information about the 9-region battlefield like the other 8 regions. Chapter 15-13. Even with Lin Sun's experience, he still couldn't figure out what the woman from the Golden Demon Snake Clan was collecting and what they could be used for. but he was sure that a treasure that could catch the attention of an eighth retribution immortal realm expert was absolutely extraordinary. The only thing that puzzled Lin Sun was that the woman didn't dare to be careless when collecting the golden liquid, as if she was facing a formidable enemy. Could it be that this ancient tree was filled with unimaginable danger? It's time to report. Not long after, the woman stood up. She had already collected a full bottle of golden liquid and decided to leave. But just when she was about to take a step forward, she felt her vision blur. Shit! The woman's expression changed abruptly, and she instinctively wanted to fight back. But before she could do anything, her throat was grabbed by a large hand, and her strength was sealed. Her face turned purple, and she was almost suffocated. She was shocked to see a young man standing in front of her, and his deep black eyes were staring at her indifferently. An expert from the ancient desolation realm. The woman instantly made a judgment. But she didn't understand how such a powerful existence could appear in the ancient desolation realm, which was so backward and declining. I want to know something. I'll ask and you'll answer. Lin Sun spoke concisely. Otherwise, you'll die. The woman's expression changed indeterminately, and she nodded with difficulty after a long time. Where is this place? The Godly Training Forest. Which area of the 9 regions battlefield is it located in? The Blood Demon Realm. Lin Sun's heart sank when he heard this. He never expected that he would be teleported to the territory of the Blood Demon Ancient Realm as soon as he entered the 9 regions battlefield. After a moment of silence, Lin Sun asked again, "How far is this place from the city of Dao Protectors?" "About 30,000 kilometers." The woman's answer made Lin Sun heave a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the Godly Training Forest was still extremely far from the base camp of the Blood Demon Ancient Realm. "Is there anyone else here besides you?" Lin Sun asked. "I don't know." As soon as the woman finished speaking, she felt the hand on her throat suddenly tighten, and the sharp pain made her want to scream. But when he opened his mouth, no sound came out. She looked resentfully at the young man in front of her, and she swore in her heart that if she had the chance to escape this time, she would definitely refine and devour this person's soul. "You better behave yourself. Otherwise, I don't mind killing you right now." As Lin Sun spoke, he asked the same question again. "I really don't know, but I do know that many of the experts from the Blood Demon Ancient region will come to the Refining God Forest," the armored lady said with a pale face. "Why?" "Gather the divine refining treasure source." These words shocked Lin Sun. He suddenly remembered that old Toad once said that the conditions for a royal weapon to be promoted to a holy treasure were extremely harsh. Other than refining many heavenly and earthly treasures and fusing them into his natal royal armament, it also depended on luck. Out of hundreds of thousands of royal armaments, it was not necessarily possible for a single sacred armament to appear. The more outstanding the appearance of a royal armament, the greater the risk it would encounter when transforming into a life-sacred armament, and it would be extremely easy for it to be destroyed. This was also the reason why many saints in the ancient desolation realm only had saint treasures and not life-sacred weapons. One had to know that saint treasures and life-sacred weapons were different. Saint treasures could be refined by saints, but life-sacred weapons were almost all transformed from their own King Dao extreme weapons. The word life represented the unusualness of such a treasure. It was not an exaggeration to say that a life-sacred weapon had already fused with one's cultivation. It was like a part of a cultivator's flesh and blood. Naturally, its power was not something that other saint treasures could compare to. However, if one was able to possess a divine refining treasure source, it would be enough to greatly increase the chances of success when a life-sacred weapon transformed into a sacred weapon. Moreover, the more divine refining treasure source there was, the greater the chances of the life-sacred weapon successfully transforming. Unfortunately, in the ancient desolation realm, a treasure like the divine refining treasure source was an incomparably precious treasure even in the ancient times. It was even rarer than a life-sacred weapon, and could only be found by chance. And in the current ancient desolation realm, it was almost impossible to find a divine refining treasure source. Lin Sun did not expect that he would be able to find such a thing in this strange, refining god forest. This made him feel refreshed. It was also at this moment that a golden illusory shadow suddenly appeared in the demonic brown eyes of the woman in armor, who was grabbed by the throat by him, and swept her gaze towards Lin Sun. Soul-killing eye skill. The innate ability of the golden demon snake. The reason why their bloodline was called Soul Devourer was because of this innate ability. Its power directly affected the soul, making it impossible to guard against. The woman in armor was obviously not a good person. After being subdued in an instant, she did not choose to use this skill directly. Instead, she waited for Lin Sun to be careless before making a move. It could be seen how cunning and vicious her mind was. Lin Sun did not block it, which made the woman in armor ecstatic. But in the next moment she was stunned. Because Lin Sun's eyes were cold and calm, as if he did not feel anything strange, nor was he affected in any way. The innate ability that had always been successful in the past had actually failed. How was this possible? The woman in armor widened her eyes and felt a chill in her heart. This was the first time she had encountered such a strange thing. Crack! At this moment, Lin Sun crushed the woman's neck with his palm and completely erased her soul. Before she died, there was a trace of puzzlement on her face. Unfortunately, Lin Sun would not tell her that there was a spirit-eating bug king who had already set foot on the hopeless road of cultivation and had been sitting in his sea of consciousness all the time. Any kind of soul attack was destined to be ridiculous. Smartass! Lin Sun sighed softly. He had wanted to ask more questions, but he also knew that after the woman in armor failed, it was destined that she would not cooperate as before, so he killed her without hesitation. Next, Lin Sun looted the spoils neatly. A white bone saber, a mutton fat bottle, a token representing the identity of the woman in armor, and a light silver storage earring. The white bone saber was a holy treasure with unparalleled sharpness, but it was not very precious. The mutton fat bottle was filled with golden, refining divine origin. In the light silver storage earring, there were some divine essence, divine materials, elixirs and other miscellaneous items needed for cultivation. The word blood demon was engraved on the token, which contained the will of this woman. After a little perception, Lin Sun knew that this woman was called Shizhen, a direct descendant of the Golden Snake clan. There was also a merit accumulated in the token, which Shizhen got after killing a strong practitioner from the ancient desolation realm. This made Lin Sun's black eyes narrow. Counting with his fingers, it had only been about 4 hours since he entered the 9 regions battlefield. But Shizhen had killed a strong practitioner from the ancient desolation realm. It seems that I am not the only one who has been moved to the area occupied by the strong practitioners of the blood demon ancient realm. Lin Sun thought for a moment and shook his head. Clatter with a sweep of his fingertips, a wisp of flame swept out and burned Shizhen's body, completely turning it into ashes and disappearing. At the same time, he felt that there was one more merit in his ancient desolation token, marked with the breath of Shizhen. However, within the 2 flying immortal tokens, there was no movement at all. It was still completely blank. Miss Ah Hu is right. If I want to obtain the battle merit fortune, I can only kill those outstanding geniuses with extraordinary battle strength or those who have become saints. The other characters don't have the battle merit fortune at all. For example, Shizhen was also a top figure who had stepped into the 8th retribution of longevity realm, but she didn't have the merit. It was obvious how difficult it was to gather 1,000 types of battle merits and luck in order to activate the strength of a flying immortal token. However, Lin Sun was not in a hurry. The 9-region battlefield had just opened. As long as he was alive, there would be opportunities to hunt down enemies who met the requirements in the future. Whoosh! Without delay, Lin Sun left the place in a flash. Come on, there was a wave of power just now. Just as Lin Sun left, a voice suddenly sounded in the depths of the dark forest. Then, a group of figures, men and women, all of whom were extremely powerful, swept out. There were 7 of them. The leader was a middle-aged man in gray with a golden snake tail and hair as black as ink. He exuded the aura of the Saint realm. When they arrived, the middle-aged man in gray looked around and his face darkened. His eyes were full of frightening cold light. Shi Zhen was killed. The middle-aged man in gray said word by word, full of killing intent. However, he instantly revealed a wisp of fear when he saw the nearby ancient tree that seemed to be made from bronze liquid. He forcefully restrained his aura and didn't dare come into contact with the ancient tree. Damn it! The faces of the men and women behind the middle-aged man in gray all darkened. No matter who it is, he must die for killing a member of our Golden Snake clan. Someone gnashed his teeth. Shi Zhen is the younger sister of Shi Lin, the saint of our clan. If he knows about this, he will be furious. Someone's face changed. Don't tell Shi Lin about this. He has already headed to the city of Dao Protectors to meet up with all the peerless figures of our blood-fiend ancient region. Once he knows about this, it will definitely affect the important matter he's shouldering. The old man in gray took a deep breath and spoke with a gloomy expression. The urgent matter at hand is to drag out the murderer. Elder Shi Feng, I'm sure that the murderer is still in the godly training forest. A man had a calm expression. He'd observed the surroundings earlier and noticed some traces of a battle, so he made such a judgment. But the godly training forest is filled with danger and is extremely vast. The enemy is hiding within it, so dragging him out is no different than looking for a needle in a haystack. Someone frowned. The most hateful thing is that the murderer is extremely cunning, and he didn't leave any aura in the nearby area. His words caused the hearts of the others to sink, and they realized that the murderer this time was obviously not a kind person. Just his ability to conceal himself was already extraordinary. The middle-aged man called Shi Feng fell silent for a moment, and then he gritted his teeth and said, "Let's take action first. If it really doesn't work in the end, then we'll ask for help from our friends from the Black-Striped Hornet clan." Chapter 1514. Black-Striped Demon B. This was an extremely unique race in the Blood Demon Ancient Realm. They had 36 pairs of black-striped compound eyes, which could see through all disguises and capture auras and traces that ordinary people could not detect. With their help, it would not be difficult to capture traces of the enemy in this strange and vast divine refining forest. But as Shi Feng said, unless it was absolutely necessary, the experts of the Golden Demon Snake Clan were unwilling to seek help from outsiders. Also, you must be careful of these divine refining ancestral trees. This is a fierce object that even saints do not dare to touch easily. Once you accidentally touch it, the tree will spit out divine refining turbid light. Anyone who is swept by it will have their flesh and blood corroded, and their soul will be turned into nourishment for the tree to devour. Shi Feng's gaze swept over the ancient tree that seemed to be made of bronze liquid not far away, and his voice was solemn as he reminded them. The nearby men and women felt a chill in their hearts. Of course, they had heard of the terror of the divine refining ancestral tree. "Let's go." Shi Feng took the lead and stepped forward. The other men and women followed closely behind. In the depths of the dark forest, there was an ancient tree that was covered with dense branches and leaves, covering the sky and the earth. Lin Sun sat cross-legged, surrounded by Dao patterns to conceal his aura. Buzz! The broken blade appeared in front of him. The blade was illusory and transparent, and a layer of obscure Dao patterns flowed on its surface. Lin Sun opened the sheep-fat bottle, and as a drop of golden divine refining treasure source fell on the broken blade, a strange scene appeared. The snow-white broken blade absorbed the drop of divine refining treasure source as if it was hungry and thirsty. Then, the blade suddenly produced a clear sound, as if it was cheering excitedly. Lin Sun's black eyes lit up. He tilted the sheep fat bottle, and the golden divine refining treasure source slowly fell on the broken blade like a thread. Then, the broken blade continued to hum, and on the surface of the transparent blade, the obscure Tao patterns became clearer and clearer. This divine refining treasure source is indeed a treasure that can only be found by chance in the outside world. Lin Sun was excited. The broken blade was a true divine weapon, and it was also Lin Sun's royal weapon. In these years, the broken blade had undergone several transformations, and its power was no longer the same as before. And Lin Sun also got two kinds of inheritance from broken blade. The first was the Yuan impartation. It was a method to control the broken blade, and it was precisely by relying on this impartation that Lin Sun, a soul-refining realm cultivator, was able to control this heaven-defying blade with ease. The second was the inheritance of the word extreme. This was an extreme method to unleash the power of the broken blade, allowing the power of the broken blade to skyrocket. But Lin Sun was clear that the inheritance of Duan Ren was divided into 4 parts. Until now, he had obtained the 2 inherited powers of Yuan and Extreme by chance. And now, the broken blade was undergoing an obvious transformation. However, until a bottle of divine refinement source was completely absorbed, except for the luster of the broken blade that was more illusory than before, there was no third kind of inheritance power that Lin Sun expected. Looks like this little bit of divine refining treasure source is not enough to transform the broken blade. Lin Sun was surprised. The God refinement treasure source was not something an ordinary divine material could compare to. It could only be found and not sought after, like an unparalleled treasure. For example, if that small bottle of God refinement treasure source was sold, it would be enough to make a saint fight for it. And the broken blade had absorbed so many God refinement treasure source, yet it still hadn't undergone a transformation. This made it even more obvious that the broken blade was not simple. A divine weapon not only possessed many obscure and mysterious mysteries and inheritances, even the resources needed for its transformation were so astonishing. This was too shocking. Lin Sun put away the broken blade, and took out the storage earring that he had snatched from Shizhen. After sensing and searching for a bit, he found a jade slip that was polished from golden scales. The jade slip recorded some information about the God refinement treasure source. It was also at this time that Lin Sun found out that the ancient trees that produced the God refinement treasure source were called the God refinement ancestral tree. At this time, it was an extremely strange and peculiar type of innate spirit wood. Even in the blood demon ancient realm, it had long since disappeared. In other words, it could only be found in the divine refining forest of the 9 regions battlefield. The roots of this tree were able to give birth to the peerless treasure, God refinement treasure source, but at the same time, this tree possessed a terrifying power called God refinement turbid light. When he read the last part of the jade slip, Lin felt refreshed. The last part of the jade slip recorded a secret technique that was specially prepared to collect divine refinement treasure source. If one did not understand this secret technique, even if a saint went to collect the God refining treasure source, they would still be attacked by the God refining ancestral tree. No wonder Shizhen was so cautious when she approached the divine refining ancestral tree. Lin Sun suddenly understood. Then, Lin Sun held his breath and began to deduce the secret method in the jade slip. He had just arrived at the 9 regions battlefield, and everything was still unknown. Now, he was in the blood demon realm, where the blood demon ancient region was located. In this situation, Lin could only take one step at a time. Of course, the most important thing now was to familiarize himself with the environment of the 9 regions battlefield. Then, he began to prepare for breaking through to the peak of the saint realm. When he became a saint, he would choose to go to the ancient wasteland world, which was located in the heart of the 9 region battlefield. At that time, He would focus on collecting achievement points and Dao luck. As for whether he could save the ancient Desolation realm from this desperate situation, it was useless to think too much about it. 6 hours later, Lin Sun had completely grasped the secret method to harvest the god-refining treasure source, and immediately decided to give it a try. Whoosh! After putting away the Dao pattern restriction array, he quietly landed on the ground from the tree and activated the secret method to conceal his aura. Not long after, Lin Sun found his target. It was a god-refining ancestral tree with a vigorous trunk that seemed to be made of bronze liquid. He carefully approached and flipped his right hand. The white bone blade that originally belonged to Shizhen appeared in his palm. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun squatted at the root of the god-refining ancestral tree. The roots of the god-refining ancestral tree were densely packed, as if there were countless of them. However, there was only one root that contained the god-refining treasure source. Identifying the roots was also very particular. Otherwise, if he chose the wrong target, he would immediately be attacked by the god-refining turbid light. Lin Sun activated the secret method he had just learned and quickly selected one of the root. With a swing of his blade, drops of golden juice immediately flowed out of the broken root and were collected by Lin Sun using the sheep fat bottle that he had prepared earlier. After doing all this, Lin Sun heaved a sigh of relief and stood up to leave. The series of actions seemed to be light and simple, but if he was the slightest bit wrong, it was extremely likely that he would encounter a mishap. In the following period of time, Lin Sun began to wander around the god-refining forest, searching for the god-refining ancestral tree that grew within, and then harvesting the god-refining treasure source. In less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn, he had already harvested a full bottle. It was a pity that although the god-refining forest was extremely vast, there were very few god-refining ancestral trees that grew there. Furthermore, each god-refining ancestral tree could only be harvested once. This also meant that if Lin Sun wanted to harvest a large amount of god-refining treasure source, he was destined to be patient and spend time to slowly collect them. Furthermore, the god-refining forest was not without dangers. Although he did not encounter any extremely terrifying things along the way. However, Lin Sun could still keenly sense that the deeper he went, the quieter the forest became, and it emitted a strange and oppressive aura. Even Lin Sun was secretly palpitating. He felt as if there was something extremely terrifying in the depths of the forest. This caused him to have no choice but to slow down. 2 hours later, Lin Sun was harvesting a god-refining treasure source from a god-refining ancestral tree when a dangerous aura suddenly surfaced in his heart. Without any hesitation, his figure flashed and quietly hid on a nearby tree. Just as Lin Sun hid himself, a group of figures silently flew over from the path he had arrived at. It was Shifeng and the others from the Golden Demon's snake bloodline. Shifeng arrived in front of the god-refining ancestral tree and sized it up. His eyes immediately lit up as he suppressed the excitement in his heart and said, "That brat just left." The group of men and women behind him perked up. However, regardless of whether it was Shifeng or these men and women, they all restrained their auras and killing intent, appearing to be extremely cautious. If that brat did not collect the god-refining treasure source, we might not have been able to discover his track. But now we only need to search for those god-refining ancestral trees that have been harvested, and we will be able to drag him out. Shifeng's eyes flickered as he spoke. As he spoke, he casually turned around and waved his sleeve. Swish! A black awl-like shuttle suddenly broke through the air and shot out at an incredible speed, heading straight for the place where Lin Sun was hiding. He had been discovered. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. His figure, which had long been ready, suddenly activated the burning god wings and disappeared into thin air. Boom! The big tree that Lin Sun was originally standing on exploded in an instant, turning into sawdust that scattered everywhere. Shifeng could not help but be a little surprised that he was unable to kill Lin Sun with a single blow. Then, with a cold snort, his figure disappeared into thin air, and he used the method of teleportation to kill Lin Sun. "You guys stay together. Be careful, I will go kill that bastard." Before leaving, Shifeng exhorted them secretly. The men and women all nodded in agreement. With Shifeng, a figure of the Saint realm, there was no chance for them to intervene. They could only wait for the good news. In an instant, a chase broke out in the God-refining forest. Although he did not know Shifeng, Lin Sun could tell from his aura that this old guy was a powerful figure who had stepped into the Saint realm. This made Lin Sun frown. The only fortunate thing was that this old guy's aura was not much different from some of the true saints he had seen. This also meant that the old guy should not be a peerless saint. However, it was still extremely dangerous to be chased by a true saint. Although Lin Sun was not afraid, if they were to fight face to face, Lin Sun only had half confidence that he could kill the old man, and that was under the premise of using the forbidden passing. Otherwise, he had no chance of winning at all. Without any hesitation, Lin Sun activated the burning god wings and rushed into the depths of the forest. The aura in the depths of the forest was frightening. But Lin Sun could not care about this now. At the same time, Shifeng could not help but be surprised. Originally, he thought he could kill Lin Sun, a young man who had not yet become a saint, at the first opportunity. Who would have thought that when this pursuit began, he would actually be unable to succeed even after a long time.